Chapter 1545. Transcending beyond the heavens, to the extent where it didn't even belong to the heavens? That place was like a plateau. However, this was definitely not a simple land. All methods were destroyed, even the highest level abilities scattered like mist there. Wasn't it in the human world? Transcending beyond the world, could it be that that place crossed time, not belonging to the past, present, or future? That was an ancient land engraved with the mottled aura of endless great eras. It was silent, bleak, grand, and ancient. What happened now? Being offered sacrifices by someone, opened by someone. It was clear that its origins were boundlessly great, but it was also extremely barren. It was unknown just how many great eras no one had set foot here. Some ruined scenes flashed past, as if it was currently being offered sacrifices by someone. One day, a bronze coffin, for some reason, appeared from the cracked plateau. Was it dug out by someone, or was it produced after the earth ruptured on its own? He couldn't see it. Then, there were several coffins that came from beyond the world, wrapped within great mist, rushing into the cracked barren plateau. The scenes behind became chaotic. He couldn't see it anymore. Chu Feng's soul was trembling. That was a type of fatal danger, a mysterious pressure that passed through endless time and space, crossing who knew how many great eras to transmit over. He was sure that all of the pressure and danger originated from the coffins in the back. Then, time was being corroded, the years erased. How terrifying of a method was this? Even the laws of time and other things were destroyed after being radiated. The scenes became chaotic. He couldn't see it anymore. In the end, several coffins were lying there, the bronze coffins already opened, divided into 3 layers. What happened? That coffin was opened. Were there creatures inside? Who was buried? Where did they go? Chu Feng discovered that he was unintentionally moving backwards. Otherwise, his name would have definitely been erased from this world, no longer existing. The scenes just now, some of the ancient events just now, seemed to be extremely serious, the level involved too high. Even though he was just peeping through space and time, it was still enough to make him die 1,000 times over. Then, he discovered something that left him stupefied and horrified. Everything just now. He didn't see it himself from the other side? He overestimated himself. Didn't he truly witness it? It was as if that was reflected by the stone jar, the scenes that appeared. It was because the stone container was still shining, a portion of the scene from just now still remaining. It floated in front of the golden symbols displayed before him. Even so, Chu Feng couldn't withstand it just now and was almost obliterated. Chu Feng smiled bitterly. He knew it. How could it be traced back to that level? He almost evaporated from the face of the earth just by looking at the woman's corpse. There was no need to even talk about tracing back to those things that had happened long ago and not in the present. He definitely did not have the ability to trace back to the source and see the ultimate truth of the ancient era. Everything was shown by the stone jar. This made everyone tremble with fear and reverence. What kind of background did this stone jar have? How much history did it have? Did it even know a bit about the ancient bronze coffin's history? However, it did not show him the person buried in the coffin. I want to see more, to truly understand the root of the problem, Chu Feng said softly. His eyes were still dripping with blood. His body was surrounded by golden symbols. He was moving about with the stone jar, resonating with it. He wanted to see even more of the past. And then, he really saw it. That bronze coffin had actually flipped sideways as if it had been placed on the altar. Was it being consecrated, or was it being used as a sacrificial offering? What are the origins of the other coffins? They can actually appear around the bronze coffin. However, the other coffins weren't on the altar. In a split second, some feedback was transmitted. One of the coffins was actually cast from mother gold. The scene that was reflected showed that all of the mother gold had been collected. This was truly the mother gold that was known to be indestructible. No matter how many eras changed, it wouldn't die. The so-called 9 Mother Gold wasn't the limit at all. There were at least dozens of them here. All things in the world, from the creation of the universe to the evolution of the absolute beginning. Since ancient times, as long as the Mother Gold had appeared, that coffin would have it. This looked much more imposing than the bronze coffin. Even though there was a sense of great vicissitudes and even an aura of decay, upon closer inspection, it was the time around the Mother Gold coffin. It was the world around it that was decaying and not the coffin itself. The other coffin was the same. It actually didn't decay itself, but instead affected the surrounding environment. It was drying up and the world was decaying. That second coffin was actually hollowed out from an ancient tree. It even carried a few leaves, fresh and tender, their vitality terrifyingly great. Chu Feng was shocked. The life force of those leaves was too rich, the feeling they gave off even far exceeding that of true immortals. They should be even more powerful than the so-called immortal kings of fallen immortal kings. Even a single leaf could be like this, the life force rising and falling like an ocean. Meanwhile, what about the life force contained within the entire coffin? If it was completely released, just how boundless would it be? What kind of creature was buried inside? Upon closer inspection, on the fresh and tender leaves, those patterns, veins, and other things were like the galaxy of the cosmos. A single leaf was like the condensation of a great thousand world. Terrifying. Great waves overflowed within Chu Feng's heart, almost suffocating. Unfortunately, in the end, he only saw these 2 coffins. The others couldn't be seen. It was because the stone jar was trembling, shaking. There was restraining fear, even more so a certain type of emotion that no longer appeared. It was clear that these coffins were different from the bronze coffin. They were extremely dangerous, and their positions were also different. They weren't on the altar, facing the bronze coffin? Moreover, was it because of their arrival that the bronze coffin appeared from the plateau? Gradually, all the coffins disappeared. When Chu Feng came back to his senses and used his spirit to repair his fiery eyes, he looked towards the other side of the moat. There was only the woman lying in a pool of blood. The coffin was nowhere to be seen. So, it was you who wanted me to see those coffins? Chu Feng lowered his head and looked at the stone jar. What background do you have? Did you witness that era? In a trance, some broken scenes appeared in Chu Feng's injured eyes. The stone jar pierced through one era after another. It seemed to be fleeing. Behind it, there seemed to be boundless terror. Then, Chu Feng completely woke up. He couldn't see anything. The stone jar was silent and no longer revealed anything. That bronze coffin has a great origin. It pierced through the world. Chu Feng speculated, his thoughts running wild. To this day, he had learned enough secrets from the Dog Emperor, Jiudao Yi, and the others, as well as heard many rumors. He even heard that the rise of the Celestial Emperor that the Dog Emperor spoke of was also because of that bronze coffin. Whose coffin was the bronze coffin? In the beginning, who was buried in it? It was very important. The one that Jiudao Yi spoke of left in it. And the Celestial Emperor that the Dog Emperor spoke of was also closely related to the bronze coffin. After the final bloody battle, he lay inside, drifting beyond the world. No one knows whether he was dead or alive. The Emperor began in the coffin and ended in the coffin? Very quickly, Chu Feng shook his head. He thought of something that Jiudao Yi vaguely mentioned. Who knew how many eras ago, coffins were not used to bury people, but to cultivate. If that was the case, then everything was different. There's something on the other side? Chu Feng's eyes gradually recovered. When he tried to look again, he saw some crystalline substance on the other side. His eyelids twitched. Was that some kind of soil? He remembered now. It was similar to the soil on the plateau where the bronze coffin was buried. As the woman's blood flowed past, under the illumination of the blood-red light, the originally ordinary soil began to glow with a misty light. This is super mutant soil. It's an unimaginable soil. Can I dig some of it away? Even though his eyes were hurting and about to split open again, Chu Feng's eyes were still burning with passion. Very quickly, some scenes appeared in his eyes. He knew where the soil came from. As expected, when the bronze coffin was lying in the area behind the woman, it fell from the ancient patterns. It came from the plateau. 1. The void trembled. The stone jar bloomed with runes and wrapped around Chu Feng. He left this world and returned to the real world. He stood under the purple tree that hadn't withered yet. At the last moment, he saw the other side of the heavenly moat. Although it was empty and all the coffins had disappeared, there seemed to be some kind of aura lingering. Was the stone jar afraid and retreating because of that? Back then, there were several other coffins that appeared in the era of the bronze coffin. Just thinking about the inside story was enough to make one shiver. Returning, Chu Feng was shocked to find that there was some soil on the stone jar. The theft of soil was successful. Not only was the stone jar afraid, but it had also stolen a treasure. Did it seize some special soil? Yes. Yes. Chapter 1546. The earth came from beyond the world, a deathly stillness that was devoid of sound and the passage of time. It was an incomparably ancient and spacious plateau. The earth that had once buried the coffin had been brought out. Chu Feng felt as if he had been struck by a thick bolt of lightning and was in a torrential downpour. His entire body went numb and cold, and his heart trembled incessantly. It was truly like a dream. What had he experienced just now? He was still in a trance even now. He had witnessed all sorts of strange scenes at the end of the pollen path. They were terrifying and strange, and he had witnessed some intermittent and inconceivable events of the past. Now Chu Feng had returned. As before, he stood under the tree as if he had never left. A gentle breeze blew, bringing with it the scent of the earth in the mountains and the freshness of the vegetation. The unwithered purple tree swayed, its patterns undulating, and its leaves turning over like the opening of a scripture. Waves of Buddhist chants roused Chu Feng. The space inside the stone jar wasn't small, but there was only a small amount of earth hanging on it. It looked very ordinary and was only a handful of it in his hands. However, its origins were too astonishing. Chu Feng glanced at the tree beside him, and then at the dark earth in his hands. Should he bury some of it at the roots? Perhaps he could even make this tree mutate again. His heart raced as he thought that his guess might come true. Today was already very special. A long time had passed since the seed had sprouted, grown, and become a tree. It should have withered long ago and turned into a seed. However, it still had some vitality and hadn't dried up yet. Chu Feng decided to give it a try. He carefully buried some of the ancient and mysterious highland soil under the big tree. He wanted to see what would happen in the end. He hoped there would be a pleasant surprise. Otherwise, how could he overtake them? How could he meet Yao Yao? And how could he face the martial madman who was likely to attack Yao Yao? The atmosphere in the two-realm battlefield was strange. It was somewhat heavy and oppressive, but it also made people excited. It could even be said that it tugged at everyone's heartstrings. What did Yao Yao's sacrificial dance summon? The three emperors appeared, and their heroic spirits illuminated the past and present. The three beams of light that reached the sky dispersed, and the three figures gradually disappeared. After a long time, the evolvers of each race still hadn't come back to their senses. The effects were too great. Even the fallen true immortals were short of breath and felt suffocated. Were they really the three emperors? There was one exception. The martial emperor's hair was disheveled, and now he was in the prime of his life. His bronze-colored robust body and intimidating eyes locked onto Yao Yao. Moreover, he was walking forward and pressing forward. Some people were shocked and sighed in their hearts. As expected of the martial madman, he was actually going to make a move? That was the successor of the great empress. What do you want? By Yao Yao's side, the old man with a mouthful of yellow teeth spoke coldly. He withdrew all of his smiles and was no longer in a playful manner. Ultimate energy expanded. To think that I would meet a descendant of the three emperors. I'd like to see just how profound these world-shaking Supreme Emperor techniques are, the martial madman said. The yellow-toothed elder wanted to spit on his face. Was his face even thicker than a cow's hide? A monster who was about to reach the end of his life wanted to lay his hands on a young girl? However, the martial madman was very serious and calm. His eyes were intimidating as he said, "Since we have to weigh the pros and cons, I will not suppress her with my cultivation level. Come, let me have a look at your art of time." He fancied the Tao law of time that Yao Yao grasped. Time could slay the celestial emperor and obliterate everything in the world. No matter what era it was, it could be said to be an unrivaled law and one of the supreme great Taos. Back then, the martial madman didn't hesitate to take risks and excavate various famed mountains in order to find the most powerful ancient technique. In the end, he found a rotten scripture by the skin of his teeth and reaped great rewards. Why did he come here today? It was only because he sensed Yao Yao's Tao law of time and was attracted here. He wanted to peek at its foundation and verify the scripture of time that he had grasped. If he could break through to the next level and unveil the ultimate time scripture, he might be able to break through quickly and climb to new heights to look down on the world. This was related to his evolutionary path. He wanted to blast his way into that lofty and glorious palace. Even if the great apocalypse is destined to be unchangeable, I will leave my name in the world and carve it on the river of time. The martial madman's expression was indifferent, but there was a kind of madness in the depths of his eyes. Even a being at his level was pessimistic about the future? Was this the madness and struggle of the last desperate moment? Was the martial madman trying his best to grab hold of an opportunity after seeing it? As far as he was concerned, time had become his strongest obsession and his only path. All of a sudden, the surrounding space was filled with dazzling silver light. One after another, snow-white wisteria spread out and took root in the void. As the leaves turned over, they produced sonorous sounds and sparks flew in all directions. Astonishing Tao patterns rippled out. Clang, clang, clang. One vine after another flew toward the martial madman like a city forged from silver immortal gold. They stretched taut like thousands of immortal spears and pierced through the space. Yao Yao took the initiative to attack. With a single thought, the void was overflowing with vitality. Apart from the immortal gold vines, there were also golden lotus flowers with fiery lights like the sea. They took root in the void and were filled with the aura of the great Taos. No one had expected that a woman of exceptional beauty who looked as clear as an immortal would be so powerful and take the initiative to attack the martial emperor. "All I want is the time scripture," the martial madman said indifferently with his hands clasped behind his back. A dazzling light shot out from between his eyebrows. With a boom, it was as if a vast and mighty ocean had exploded in his surroundings. It was a glaring sea of light that blocked all the immortal gold vines that were charging at him. Then they exploded. Fragments of the great Taos fluttered everywhere as the space was torn apart. However, he didn't maintain his disdainful and arrogant attitude for long before he was drowned out by the sound of scriptures. It was a sea of ripples and a vast amount of golden light. Golden lotus flowers bloomed continuously, and every petal was a scripture. They fluttered in the air and drowned the martial madman. Everyone was shocked. Vaguely, they seemed to see an empress descending from the sky as if she was a sovereign overlooking the world. That was Yao Yao. She was bathed in golden lotus flowers and lingered in the world filled with golden scriptures. Every movement she made was filled with mighty power as she blasted a palm at the martial madman. Emperor technique. Many people were astonished. The pupils of a few fallen true immortals constricted as they stared attentively. That was because there were such records in their orthodoxy's highest secret scriptures. However, their methods, their inheritance, had already become dark, unable to use this type of divine energy anymore. Flowers bloom with a single thought. Who can contend against her in the heavens and on the earth? Someone muttered. Apparently, he had recalled some ancient legends. As expected, even the martial madman was moved. He was drowned by the golden petals that filled the sky. Every petal was engraved with scriptures, and they were all supreme secret scriptures. They gave him an aura as if the 33 heavens were pressing down on him and wanted to obliterate the world. Each golden petal was like a layer of the heavens as it pressed down. With a rumble, the heaven and earth exploded. The turbulent flow of spatial energy surged like a broken dam in the sea of stars. The domain around the martial madman was distorted and then torn apart. The scriptures and the golden petals broke through his protective barrier and slashed at him. Of course, this was also the result of him not suppressing Yao Yao with his realm. Runes flowed around the martial madman's body. He was like an immortal king who could not be destroyed in this world. The aura of the great Tao covered the sky and the earth. Many evolvers almost went limp on the ground and wanted to worship him. His fist was incomparably resplendent and directly exploded the heaven and earth. The two-realm battlefield rumbled and was about to collapse. However, the golden lotus petals were firm and immortal. They flickered with boundless beams of light and the sky was filled with scriptures. There were divine ripples everywhere like the rising and falling of the vast sea. Boom! The lotus petals flew over and rang like a great bell. It was so loud that even the deaf could hear and it cleansed everyone's mind. Every golden lotus petal was terrifyingly heavy and dazzling. When it crashed in front of the martial madman, it truly weighed more than millions of caddies and rumbled incessantly. The scriptures on the lotus petals were glaring and divine as they illuminated the world. One could see the golden lotus petals submerging the martial madman and sealing him within. They formed a huge golden lotus and began to close. Everyone inhaled a breath of cold air. What kind of power was this? That graceful woman actually dared to seal a martial emperor as soon as she arrived? This made many of the older generation begin to doubt their lives. This era was too crazy, and they felt that they had fallen behind the times. A woman was actually so powerful and tyrannical that she could suppress a martial emperor with just a raise of her hand. Within the resplendent lotus of the great Tao, the martial madman's eyes were as cold as lightning. How many years had it been since someone dared to look down on him? His entire body was covered in dazzling runic flames. He suddenly shook and was about to shatter the divine lotus. With a boom, many lotus petals began to crack and interweave as if they were about to explode. However, the golden lotus petals shone brilliantly and the cracks rapidly healed. The petals flourished once again and were about to close and refine the martial madman. Many people inhaled a breath of cold air. It was just a flower, but it was actually capable of trapping a martial emperor. The evolvers of the Yang realm, in particular, were incomparably shocked and felt that it was inconceivable. No one understood the martial madman better than they did. He was a madman who was revered as a martial emperor and had intimidated many eras. Today, he actually encountered such a woman. This is the emperor flower. It's understandable that it stunned the world when it first bloomed. A fallen true immortal said in a deep voice. No one knew whether he was talking about the secret technique of blooming flowers with a thought or Yao Yao herself was the emperor flower's first bloom. Everyone's emotions were fluctuating and it was difficult for them to calm down. In fact, since the martial emperor made his move to weigh Yao Yao's laws of time, everyone realized that this woman was absolutely extraordinary and beyond imagination. As a matter of fact, it was indeed so. However, the martial emperor was worthy of his name. His body was amidst the dazzling lotus petals. His right hand moved and countless runes surged. It was the power of time and the patterns of time that erupted with a loud bang. In the blink of an eye, some of the petals withered and were actually about to wither. He was very direct as he performed the scripture of time and blasted everything in his way. He had originally wanted to force Yao Yao to use the great Tao of time. Now, he was the first to attack. Something astonishing happened. Some of the golden lotus petals withered, but they were quickly reborn. The emperor flower would never wither. It turned into a scroll and flipped through it. Countless runes blossomed and drowned the martial madman once again. Boom! The martial madman's blood chi surged violently and seeped out of his skin. It engulfed the sky and the earth like a vast ocean, blocking the golden lotus petals and avoiding the emperor flower. At the same time, he performed the secret technique of time and opened up an ancient path of time that extended toward Yao Yao. He raised his fist and attacked. His fist was as brilliant as a concentrated sea of stars and as dazzling as the condensation of countless suns. He activated the scripture of time, and the peerless fist seal seemed to be able to destroy the heavens. The martial emperor's imposing manner was too powerful. He was the only one reigning supreme and difficult to match. What surprised everyone was that Yao Yao moved almost at the same time as him. Instead of dodging, she flew high into the air and took the initiative to attack. She was like a fairy, ethereal and otherworldly. But the moment she made her move, it was so shocking that it shocked the world. She was like an emperor flower in full bloom, releasing a peerless brilliance amidst her absolute beauty. That pure white and translucent fist actually blasted toward the martial madman's peerless fist seal. It showed no signs of dodging and was instead extremely powerful. She wanted to meet force with force against the martial emperor. "I've never been defeated in the same domain." Yao Yao's voice shocked everyone. Boom! The two charged together. The martial emperor's fist seal was like the sky and represented the great power of the martial emperor's peerless power since prehistoric times. Yao Yao, on the other hand, was sharp and resplendent amidst her emptiness. She was fearless of all enemies and released a peerless and tyrannical energy amidst her immortal aura. Everyone's expressions changed. This woman was truly out of the ordinary. This was a great confrontation between the pinnacle. Was she actually going to shake the martial emperor's peerless foundation? In the mountains, Chu Feng was moved. He was somewhat excited at the bottom of his heart. After burying that ineffable era's plateau soil, the big tree had actually changed. On the tree, the withering flower lit up once again. Wisps of a special aura were released and a wisp of mist pervaded the air. It descended like a sovereign and enveloped him. "Come, I'm going to attack the martial madman." The Third Sect Master. Chapter 1547. Originally, some of the leaves were drooping and sickly. According to the time, it should have withered and become a seed again. But now, the purple-brown tree once again shone with strands of vitality. The most important thing was that the flower was becoming larger, continuously expanding until it reached 1.5 meters in diameter. Strands of mysterious mist scattered down and covered Chu Feng. In a daze, he seemed to have seen the most ancient era again. He saw the plateau outside of this world, silent and cold. Even time was corroded there, obliterated, the so-called unbreakable all became nothingness there. Only the plateau remained, desolate and silent. It carried the last traces of the most ancient era and buried the bronze coffin. "I see it again." Chu Feng seemed to be talking in a dream as he sank deep into it. However, this time, he didn't touch the Tao and didn't reach the end of the pollen road. He was still in the real world. He wouldn't forget his experience not long ago. He saw the origin of the pollen road, saw the fallen woman, and saw several different coffins. What happened in the most ancient era? As long as one paid attention to it, as long as one explored it, one would be obliterated. Even the divine abilities of the heavens couldn't stop it. Fallen true immortals turned to ashes and immortal kings died. Who is buried under the plateau? Who was buried in the bronze coffin? Or, what kind of creature was sleeping inside? It seemed to be the source of everything. Even the one Jiui spoke of, and the heavenly emperor that the dog emperor followed had interacted with this coffin. Chu Feng was trying his best to visualize, wanting to see through the frozen earth and the scenery under the wasteland. Unfortunately, that was outside of this world. If the stone jar didn't reveal itself and show him, even if an immortal king came personally and burned his own great Tao, he still wouldn't be able to find that place, let alone see the truth. In the end, he discovered that the mist suddenly became thicker, isolating everything in front of him. The plateau he could vaguely see was submerged, and everything disappeared. In reality, in the real world, the tree he was standing on was releasing a special mist that enveloped him. Then, he discovered that he was evolving. The strange soil quality was actually so special. He only took a small pinch and didn't use all of it. When he buried it under the roots, this kind of change happened. The flower was enormous, eventually becoming snow-white and sparkling. What scattered down wasn't pollen, but rather a hazy mist. It was like immortal energy, but also like a layer of strange veil. Chu Feng felt a tearing pain. On his back, a pair of pure white wings grew fiercely, breaking through his flesh. His full head of hair flew up, his face delicate and pretty. Now, a pair of wings actually appeared on his back, as if an angel had descended into the world. However, he didn't want wings. Was he still a human? The change was too intense and too fast. He didn't even have time to react before he grew a pair of holy wings. However, when he lightly flapped his wings, he felt a powerful energy that was boundlessly terrifying. His wings instantly tore through space, and he directly shot up into the sky. His speed was simply too fast. Then, with a flap of his wings, he returned in a flash and stood under the tree once more. Soon after, he felt intense pain again. His ribs, as well as his back, broke open one after another. Pairs of wings grew out one after another. Some were pure and snow-white, some dazzling with golden light, some pitch-black like ink, and even more so the color of the underworld. There were a total of 12 pairs of wings that appeared on Chu Feng's back, all of them flowing with astonishing symbols and filled with great Tao fragments. This made him look like an angel creature from the history of evolution, moreover the highest level. However, upon closer inspection, it didn't seem like it, but instead more like the wings of a pung, phoenix, golden crow, and other highest-level bird. After the blood on his back congealed, Chu Feng was no longer in pain. He sensed the astonishing energy, and he had a type of resolution. When the 12 pairs of wings spread out, he could easily cut apart his opponents, and with a flap of his wings, he could turn those great enemies into ashes. Moreover, he clearly sensed that his body began to become ethereal, his body becoming more and more healthy, becoming more and more agile. It was as if with a slight movement, he would be able to travel 100,000 li. A single spread of the great Ping King's wings is already 108,000 li. Did I surpass the great Ping King? Chu Feng seriously suspected that he had set foot on the path of recovery of some ancient creature's genes. However, his expression changed in the blink of an eye. His left shoulder was very itchy, and the skin there had split open. Unexpectedly, a head had begun to drill out. This head somewhat resembled him, but there was an extremely cold aura to it. Its pupils were silvery white, and it erupted with lightning, instantly turning a giant mountain in front of him into flying ashes. This was somewhat terrifying. There was actually an extra head. Although its power wasn't small, he still looked somewhat strange. Suddenly, he felt a sharp pain in his right shoulder as another head suddenly grew out. This head was full of fluttering hair, and it easily tore apart the heaven and earth. It was truly demonic. Rumor has it that when the great cosmos evolves, they will decay and become indescribable. The root cause of all this is because they have received too much pollen, and when developing their potential, they will release too many indescribable things. After sensing this, Chu Feng thought of this matter. The reason why the great cosmos had decayed and experienced such terrifying changes was not only related to the strange substances, but also because the pollen path had given them too much and they couldn't bear it. Now, he hadn't even reached that realm yet, but he had already encountered such changes. Had it given him too many mutations? He raised his head and looked at the giant flower on the tree. The mysterious mist drifted down and covered him. Was this stimulating the release of the immortal treasury in his body, or was it directly bestowing him with some kind of divine ability? Or perhaps it was opening up his special bloodline. I want power, but I don't want this kind of mutation. If this goes on, will I still be myself? What kind of creature will I become? Chu Feng became vigilant. In the blink of an eye, he experienced an even more ferocious mutation. On his head, his scalp split open, and a pair of sparkling purple dragon horns grew out from his hair. Accompanied by lightning and thunder, he casually moved, and that pair of horns broke through the blue dome of heaven, releasing terrifying and astonishing lightning. However, these changes weren't accompanied by decay. Overall, it could be considered a normal extraordinary mutation. But very soon, Chu Feng couldn't stay calm anymore. He felt a wave of numbness at the base of his arm. Amidst popping sounds, his flesh split open and two pairs of arms grew out. He had become a three-headed, six-armed monster. Was this the reappearance of a legend? In the history of evolution, this should only be a great divine ability, but why was it dripping with blood and growing out of his body? Chu Feng was increasingly aware that things weren't looking good. If he could be said to be able to remain calm at the moment, then the following changes frightened him. He was in a state of panic and could no longer remain calm. That was because there was something strange between his legs. The moment he lowered his head, his face immediately turned pale. What was going on? There was originally one pung spreading its wings, but in the blink of an eye there were three of them. He really wanted to say, "To hell with your second grandpa. This really doesn't need three." In the blink of an eye, his body stiffened and he felt somewhat itchy. Were they going to grow scales again? He couldn't bear it any longer. Chu Feng quickly took action to intervene in this kind of mutation. First, he started from the wings on his back and decisively refined them. He didn't want the wings because this was a kind of heart-wrenching pain. He used a wondrous technique to obliterate the wings, stripping them from his body and refining them cleanly. At the same time, he used his fiery eyes to observe internally. He wanted to preserve that kind of ability because he saw that there were symbols and mysterious patterns at the base of the 12 pairs of wings. That was the source of some kind of ability. Under Chu Feng's guidance, the great Tao patterns disappeared from the surface of his body. However, they circulated within his body and spread to his limbs and bones. Then, he discovered that his own agility was still there. With a slight movement of his body, he arrived 50,000 kilometers away. This wasn't the use of a wondrous technique, but rather his body's instincts. It was as if the 12 pairs of wings were still there. He could break through the heaven and earth in an instant and fly away at top speed. At the same time, he couldn't leave behind the two heads on his left and right shoulders. He thought of a way to refine them and preserve their great Tao essence. Not long after, he was drenched in blood again. He guided the mysterious patterns on his shoulders to spread all the way to his eyes, making his fiery eyes even more astonishing. He stared ahead with all his might and glanced at the mountains and rivers. In the blink of an eye, the great mountains disintegrated and burned to ashes. At the same time, when he focused his gaze and activated his energy, it was as if an immortal sword had slashed through. It split the heaven and earth and formed a terrifying crack in the dark void. The two heads disappeared, but the divine might they possessed was inherited by his eyes. Chu Feng decisively reconstructed his body. He only wanted to become a human and didn't want his body to mutate inexplicably. However, he also wanted to preserve those divine abilities and special techniques. I'm Chu Tiandi. Reconstructing a mutated body like this is equivalent to forcefully suppressing and grinding away some kind of inauspiciousness. Chapter 1548. A Secret That Can't Be Spoken Of. Chu Feng lowered his head, looking at the secret that had his legs refined. He truly felt incomparably ashamed. Then, he became serious and began to pull out his bones. At the same time, he purified his blood, removed his dragon horns, and dug out his divine tendons and sacred skin. His entire body was dripping with blood. He underwent astonishing changes, one that was even more serious than before. What wings, 3 heads, 6 arms, and other things. Even his skin was changed, becoming a golden sacred skin. There were also those tendons that released divine light. They were like horned dragons but also like vines. They extended throughout his body and interweaved, causing his flesh to swell. It was extremely terrifying. Those were divine tendons. He didn't want any of these things. He only wanted to be a human. These abilities could be left behind, but his body definitely couldn't be changed. Turning his back on the human race wasn't something he wanted. I have 3 heads, 6 arms, 12 wings, and even the 3 secrets of Ping Qing 10,000 Li. Chu Feng's voice rang through the mountains. However, I don't care. He then added. He was extremely satisfied with his current state. He had gotten rid of these troublesome matters. However, as soon as he finished shouting in the mountains, his heart immediately felt intense pain. That originally robust and powerful energy source that was red like a sun actually cracked open, and then with a pu sound it exploded. Chu Feng's face immediately became pale. His body staggered backwards, almost falling on his back. His mouth was full of bloody suds. How could an ordinary person endure this type of sudden change? This type of serious injury could easily take one's life. Even if it was an expert who suddenly exploded his heart like this, his vitality would still be greatly injured, to the extent where it might even harm his foundation and exhaust large amounts of spiritual matter. Pung pung pung. In that instant, an expanse of purple symbols blossomed. Mysterious symbols appeared where his heart was, condensing a bloody mist and evolving into great Tao patterns. In the end, a purple heart was born that was full of vitality and throbbing. The changes were too fast. In that instant, Chu Feng felt as if his limbs and bones were filled with even greater power. The purple true blood was like magma, but also like a stellar stream. It surged violently, extending to every part of his body. The energy intensity was astonishing. His blood transformed, and his heart underwent rebirth. This was an extremely intense and terrifying transformation. His heart was instantly replaced, and the level of his true blood increased substantially. Chu Feng frowned and did not immediately chop at the heart. This was because he discovered that this did not seem to be a mutation. Instead, it was his sovereign personage's physique becoming stronger. The lightning-fast silver blood had turned into purple blood. Furthermore, it had a faint golden light, like molten metal flowing through it. 4th Revolution Human King? This was the 4th metamorphosis. Xiao Qin was astonished. According to the records, it would take several thousand years to reach the 3rd cycle of sovereign personage. However, he was now at the 4th cycle. Xiao Qin had greatly shortened this process. He knew that this definitely had a price. In the end, it would be accompanied by decay, inauspiciousness, and other things. This was bound together with his own evolution. But was he afraid now? He didn't care at all. He had been thinking of ways to increase his strength, wanting to become the strongest in a short period of time. Otherwise, with the Great War already about to arrive, this great era about to reach its end, if he still didn't grow up, he would be nothing more than a pile of dirt in the end. What future and potential was there to talk about? He didn't change his true blood and calmly waited for it to evolve naturally. However, he had heard the legends that the end of the sovereign personage's blood was to return. Only then would it be the sovereign personage's blood. At this moment, The sound of thunder suddenly rang out from above Chu Feng's head. The sound was deafening, and the snow-white lightning shone down. The flowers on the tree actually exploded and then withered. At the same time, the entire tree withered. Its life had finally come to an end. This seed had already displayed extraordinary power today. The time it could stay in this world was much longer than before. A snow-white beam of light fell onto the ground like a thunderbolt. With a pu sound, it even split apart the mountain. That was a long blade. It was entirely snow-white and incomparably sharp. It was suitable for an adult to hold in their hands as they galloped through the battlefield. It was a vicious weapon. Chu Feng walked over and picked it up. He was extremely shocked. This was the result of the tree blossoming and then withering. It was the seed left behind after the final metamorphosis. This was completely different from the past. It was actually a true weapon and no longer a pocket-sized one. Was it because the quality of the soil this time was different and beyond imagination, so the seed left behind also began to be different? Chu Feng didn't know. As early as when that pure white flower grew to a diameter of 1 or 2 meters, he had already realized that there might be an abnormality this time. It really was so. With a slight activation, the snow-white blade light slashed through the sky. This blade was too sharp. As Chu Feng operated it, it became densely packed and its entire body was covered in Tao patterns. Can it kill a true immortal? Can it kill a fallen immortal king? Chu Feng raised the blade and soared into the sky. His aura skyrocketed, and with a slash of the blade, it was as if he was going to slash apart this part of the Yang realm. Energy exploded like a mushroom cloud and drowned out a part of the sky. His terrifying aura increased by a large margin. Has my evolution succeeded? He was talking to himself. Although he had undergone another metamorphosis, he was still unsatisfied. It was too difficult to kill the martial madman. That was because he was now in the state of a quasi-almighty. It could be said that he had taken a step in, but it could also be said that he was still lacking a heel. However, Chu Feng felt that he could enter at any time. He ferociously shook the runes all over his body. In an instant, his limbs and bones were all glowing with Tao patterns circulating. The abilities that were born not long ago appeared at the same time. For example, his ribs and back expanded like 12 rock wings. In fact, those were resplendent golden runes interweaving. Above his head, dragon-shaped blood energy that pierced through the heavens rushed up. Those were the runes left behind by the dragon horns that had been born earlier. They were glowing and fusing with his blood energy. As for the 3 heads and 6 arms and the fiery eyes, they all had different manifestations. His entire body was covered in interweaving Tao patterns. I still need to purify more. The runes are in my hands, and the laws are condensed into nothingness. Chu Feng said softly. He baptized his body once again and made those runes return to nothingness. They shouldn't take root in corresponding parts of his body like root. He only returned to his normal state after a long time. He felt that this was the only way to completely return to the human race. I've become a dual Tao immortal with a single thought. Chu Feng clearly understood his own state, but he didn't take that final step. He wanted to observe for a while. That was because he had a premonition that once he became a dual Tao immortal, his entire body would rapidly decay. It might even be irreversible, and the Zhou clan's speculation would become true. I haven't fallen into a state of despair yet, so I'll leave myself some hope. I won't step in for now, but I'll rush in when the need arises. Chu Feng's expression was resolute. He knew what he had to do. At the same time, he was more or less confident. He didn't believe that he would really walk toward destruction and decay if he were to be forced into such a situation. He wanted to ascend. Now, he lacked that kind of opportunity. It was difficult for him to fully unleash his potential and activate the miracle without cutting off all means of retreat. Even if I become a dual Tao immortal, it'll still be difficult for me to kill the martial madman. Time waits for no man. What should I do to save Yao Yao? Chu Feng was anxious, not for himself. The main reason he was so anxious to evolve was to save Yao Yao. Celestial Emperor, wake up! In the end, he braced himself and spoke. He didn't want to borrow the stone jar's power at first, but now, he was throwing caution to the wind for Yao Yao. There was no doubt that there was a huge problem with this jar. Its origins were terrifying, and it bore unimaginable karma. He would have to pay it back in the future. Now Chu Feng couldn't care less. However, the stone jar was quiet and didn't react at all. It was as still as an empty space. Chu Feng suddenly looked up. Then, he couldn't help but eat and began to summon the divine beast. Black Dog, Dog Emperor, Holy Saint, where are you? I miss you. He shouted at the firmament like a llama. At the same time, he visualized the giant black dog's appearance in his mind and constantly muttered the two words, Dog Emperor. However, he didn't get any response even after a long time. He could only change the way he addressed the beast and shout, Dog. Dog, where are you? I, the Celestial Emperor, summon you. Millions and millions of miles away, in the boundless nothingness, in a place beyond the Yang realm, the Dog Emperor had a square head, large ears, eyes as large as copper bells, and ears protruding. He bared his badly damaged white teeth and used his large claws to pick his ears. He murmured, This dog is old and deaf. Why do I feel like someone is talking about me? Are you going to offer me a sacrifice? Are you giving me a sacred sacrifice? Then, it completely exploded in anger because it finally heard clearly that someone was calling it a dog. Woof! He immediately opened his bloody mouth and bit at a certain part of the void. He wanted nothing more than to bite that world to pieces. Beside it was the bald man, as well as the rotten corpse. They were all given a fright, thinking that the dog had gone mad and was going to attack them with its black mouth. At the same time, in Chu Feng's world, a giant black shadow appeared among the mountains and rivers. It opened its mouth wide and bit over, swallowing the whole mountain in one gulp. Chu Feng's hair stood on end. He quickly retreated and avoided this bite. Did he really summon a divine beast? Dog Emperor, don't bite. We're on the same side. We fought side by side. Do you know who helped you in the Soul River? Look carefully, shouted Chu Feng. Millions and millions of miles away, in the boundless void, the Dog Emperor picked his ears and murmured, What the hell? Who's trying to get close to me? We suffered heavy losses in this battle, so I can't hear you clearly. Do you hear me? He asked the two people beside him. At this time, the rotten corpse's expression was also ugly. In the end, his liver almost exploded. This was because he vaguely heard someone murmuring and whispering to get close to him. They said that he was that person's bloodline and that he was some little Taoist. F***CKU your grandpa, don't let this Taoist grandpa catch you. The rotten corpse's neck was red. In the Yang realm, Chu Feng was anxious. Why didn't it work? He cursed a dog, but apart from almost being bitten, there was no reaction? Old Nine Daoi Ninth Master, where are you? Hurry up and bless me. I'm going to kill the martial madman. Chu Feng once again summoned a vicious beast, a sequence creature. What's the matter? This time, Nine Daoi reacted in time. He was crying and crying. This was because he had entered the path of reincarnation. Deep inside, he found clues and learned the cruel truth. That person's son was lying in a coffin. How is this possible? What's wrong with this world? Even that person's son ended up like this? He couldn't believe it. That person clearly wanted to resurrect many people and let those people reappear in the world. How could even his own son die? Nine Daoi's vision went black and his ears were ringing. He had a bad feeling. If even that person's son was dead, then what about those people back then? Could it be that they were all dead? Most importantly, could it be that there was something wrong with that person himself? Celestial Dharch, attack! Please bless me! Shouted Chu Feng. He once again summoned the Dog Emperor, the rotten corpse, and 9 Dowie. Then, he didn't care anymore. He flew toward the two-realm battlefield and tore through the sky. Bless the attacking Celestial Dharch! Chapter 1549. Chu Feng's speed was too fast as he closed in on the two realms battlefield. It was as if he was treading on the river of time. Beneath his feet were time particles and dense, immortal mist. His body was swift and violent like a resplendent bolt of lightning as he tore through the sky. One could see mysterious symbols flickering and Tao patterns interweaving beneath his feet. In his surroundings, it was as if there were 12 wings flapping. It was as if a Kuan Ping had spread its wings, soaring into the 9 heavens and overlooking the Yang realm. He would soon arrive at the battlefield. Of course, those weren't true Kuan Ping wings. They had long since been refined by Chu Feng. The 12-winged symbols returned to one and returned to the void. With a single thought, they could appear all over his body. Now, those symbols were born at the bottom of his feet, allowing him to move like lightning. It was as if he had pierced through the sky of history and was running through the years. The current 12-winged phenomenon was a natural Tao technique. Auspicious multicolored light blossomed outside his body and adorned his surroundings. It became a divine and transcendent contrast and turned into the background. This was too astonishing. In the past, he needed to borrow the power of domains to cross the void. But now, the ability he displayed made even the powerhouses pale in comparison. His speed surpassed the limit and could quickly rush from one province to the next. Chu Feng comprehended that when his speed broke through a critical point, dense time particles would appear and support his body, making him clear, powerful, and divine. That was why he could quickly rush from the Yang realm to the desolate border realm wall. Along the way, he cursed the dog several times. In order to provoke the Dog Emperor, he was throwing caution to the wind. Dog, squeak if you're still alive. Woof, it's you, little bastard. This Emperor will swallow you alive. Even though the Dog Emperor was old, deaf, and its foundation was greatly damaged, it still knew who he was in the end. He was always being visualized in people's hearts, remembered and talked about by others. How could a spiritual creature like it not feel it? It was so angry that it wanted nothing more than to stuff Chu Feng between its teeth. But in the end, both sides reached an agreement. The Dog Emperor compromised because it learned with astonishment that this youth was suspected to have participated in the Soul River battle and had attacked the sacrificial ground together. Not only was he in the same camp, but his roots were also unfathomable. Of course, Chu Feng had buried it on purpose. Otherwise, he was afraid that the dog would turn against him and even rob him of his stone jars and other treasures. Millions and millions of miles away, beyond the void of the Yang realm, the face of the corpse beside the dog monarch darkened. It was as if it had been struck by lightning. This unreliable youth seemed to be related to it by blood? 2F** King Unreliable. That little monster with the surname Chu is the cheap little father of the soul light he split off? After the Dog Emperor understood what was going on, he opened his mouth wide and placed a large paw on the corpse's shoulder. He smiled brightly and said, "You have a father now." The zombie nearly exploded on the spot. At this moment, Chu Feng shouted at the zombie, "Don't kill an acquaintance. Let's talk among ourselves." Kill an acquaintance. The decayed corpse's face first turned black, then green. He really wanted to kill someone. Am I acquainted with you? Oh, I'm trying to avoid killing an acquaintance. Does this mean that you and I are related by blood? Do you want to be my father? It wasn't as simple as the father of the split souls. The zombie really wanted to sweep through the world. Millions and millions of strands of divine light soared into the sky. At this moment, it was simply shaking the heavens. Chu Feng explained and carried out all kinds of unclear narrative. His nonsensical swindling temporarily quelled the anger of the man and dog in the outer realm. They reluctantly agreed to protect his life at the critical moment, but they were very unwilling. Very soon, Chu Feng also made contact with the Nine Dao again, and felt the sorrow of a sequence creature. Chu Feng didn't say much and only left a message. He might not return from this trip, so he asked the Nine Dao to take care of him. A bolt of lightning streaked across the horizon, causing the heavens to crack. It dove into the two-realm battlefield and smashed onto the ground with a boom, creating a terrifying golden mushroom cloud. It was as if a weapon from a technological civilization had bloomed ferociously. Chu Feng had arrived. He brought with him lightning, flames, and intense energy radiation as he charged into the two-realm battlefield. He was afraid that something would happen to Yao Yao, so he didn't slow down in the slightest and rushed over frantically. What was this place? The battlefield between the two realms was overseen by true immortals and guarded by ultimate life forms. It was impossible for him to not attract attention even if he didn't want to. For a moment everyone was dumbfounded. That was because Chu Feng hadn't left for long. On this battlefield, he had subdued several fallen immortal kings and killed reincarnation hunters before leaving calmly. He had originally run away, but in the blink of an eye, he had come back? One had to know that the reincarnation passage had appeared and a large vermilion coffin was faintly discernible in the depths of the reincarnation path. There were also powerful hunters and even stronger experts on the side. How could he still dare to come? In addition, there were many people who were hostile to him here, such as the Yuan clan and the Human King Mo clan. The most terrifying one was naturally the martial madman. Chu Feng, why did you come back? Zhou Shi was anxious. Not long ago, her eyes were filled with tears and she was worried that something had happened to Chu Feng. That was because his figure had faded from her heart and had even completely disappeared. Now, seeing him return safely, she was afraid again. What if the mortal enemies here wanted to make a move against him? Chu Feng secretly told her not to worry. As long as he dared to appear, there would be no problems. Brother, do you have a death wish? Old Gu's face twitched. He felt that Chu Feng was courting death. Chu Feng gave a simple reply in order to avoid the people in his camp from overreacting and helping him out. That would lead to unnecessary danger. Then, he saw the duel in the air. There was Yao Yao. It was really her. Many years had passed. Apart from becoming more powerful, she was as graceful as ever. Her beautiful appearance hadn't changed at all. She was still that Yao Yao. What shocked Chu Feng the most was that she was fighting against the martial madman. Back then, even he had to lower his head and call her fairy sister. Now, she was even more brilliant. No wonder she had the reputation of being number one under the starry skies in ancient times. Unfortunately, she had been delayed and perished in ancient times. Chu Feng's emotions surged. He couldn't forget the last time they parted. Yao Yao had used up the last of her strength to send him and the stone jar out of the abyss with blood dripping from the corner of her mouth. She herself had fallen into eternal darkness. That meant that she would die and her Tao would vanish. She would be swallowed by the darkness and would never return. Back then, Chu Feng was in despair and mourning. Every time he thought of that woman called Yao Yao, his heart would ache and he wished he could return to that moment. After so many years of separation, they reunited here. That woman in clothes whiter than snow could actually fight against a martial emperor. She was so breathtaking that he was deeply surprised and astonished. Of course, Chu Feng understood in that instant that it wasn't a final battle. The martial madman hadn't used his realm to oppress others. Even so, it was still a miracle. One had to know that the fierce man known as the martial emperor had achieved his Tao in prehistoric times. He was practically unrivaled in the Yang realm. His insight and experience weren't something others could imagine. The battle in the sky was exceptionally intense. It was a collision between an emperor technique and a martial emperor. Yao Yao's sleeves fluttered in the wind. She wasn't weak at all. On the contrary, although she was an ethereal woman, Her attacks were quite tyrannical. She dared to use her bare hands to attack the martial madman. Her spotlessly white palms looked as sparkling and translucent as fine jade. However, the energy she unleashed was like a landslide and a tsunami. It shook the world and split the blue dome of heaven. Bang! As she waved her white hands, thousands of divine lotuses of the great Tao bloomed. Tens of thousands of sparkling petals fluttered in the air. They were wrapped in glaring energy and whistled as they drowned the martial madman. The martial madman's fist smashed through the rain of petals. With a boom, the light beam that erupted between the two tore apart the void and practically shook the sea of stars. Amidst the powerful energy and dazzling splendor, their bodies were resplendent and their hair fluttered in the wind. It was as though they were bathed in lightning as they attacked each other with great vigor. During this process, both of them used their trump cards. It's actually forward and reverse time. Even the fallen true immortal was moved. He was fairly shocked to see that Yao Yao's time runes actually contained forward and reverse time. As expected, when Yao Yao raised her white hands, her right hand formed the forward and reverse time. In a trance, a great river of time surged forward unstoppably. Everything in history was about to be struck into dust and obliterated. And in her left hand, there was a light flowing in the opposite direction. It was about to reverse time and throw the world into chaos. The fragments of time flowed backward in a dense and disorderly arrangement. This was too terrifying. Not only was she proficient in the scripture of time, but she could also deduce forward and reverse time. This made the martial madman's pupils contract in fear. But this was also what he needed. In order to comprehend that rotten scripture he had unearthed, the taboo chapter on the art of time, he needed to observe Yao Yao's emperor technique. It was an unrivaled wondrous principle. Forward and reverse time blasted over at the same time, causing time and space to become unstable. Especially when the forward and reverse time intersected, it was as though the universe was being turned upside down and the history of the Yang realm was being reversed. Rumble! Countless time particles boiled and erupted here. They transformed into a sea of lava that surged and evaporated. The martial madman let out a low roar. He slashed through the ages and shook everyone's eardrums. He put his hands together and time, like a blade, split open the void and the great heaven and earth as he slashed at Yao Yao. This was also the power of time. It wreaked havoc and erupted with an incomparable aura. Boom! This place almost collapsed. The vault of heaven shattered like porcelain falling to the ground. That was time breaking through all matter, wanting to obliterate all obstructions. This was a confrontation between Yao Yao and the martial madman. An empty and bright woman was forcefully attacking a martial emperor. In the end, the river of time surged and the time particles swept through this place like a sea. Everyone was swept away by the true immortals and ultimate beings. Some people were swept by the light waves at the borders. In an instant, it seemed as though they had aged 100,000 years. Their hair turned snow-white and then fell off. There were some people who were even stranger. Their robust youths reversed time and returned to a child. They began babbling and learning to speak. It looked ridiculous, but it was terrifying to think deeply about it. That was the result of the two experts bursting forth with time. Both of them retreated. A corner of Yao Yao's sleeve fluttered down and exploded into light particles. Evidently, it had been cut down by the martial madman. The martial madman's bronze-colored body emitted a terrifying luster. A lock of his hair fell down and turned into flying ash, dissipating between heaven and earth. Everyone who saw this was dumbstruck. They were startled for that woman. Could she really contend with a martial emperor? The most terrifying thing was that the two's realms, vision, and experience were different. It was truly shocking to be able to fight to this stage. That woman was indeed peerless in the field of combat and possessed unparalleled aptitude. Creatures of a higher evolutionary rank would inevitably suffer a crushing defeat if they fought with a martial emperor in the same realm. Yao Yao and the martial madman temporarily stopped and retreated. They all looked at Chu Feng on the ground. This young man's arrival had also alarmed them. Under such circumstances, Chu Feng traversed the vast sky like a large star. He crashed to the ground at an extreme speed and naturally became the focus of attention. Many people were watching him. It's really unavoidable. No matter where I go, I'm always the center of attention. There's nothing I can do about it, said Chu Feng. It was just one sentence, but he had drawn enough hatred and made a group of people want to kill him. Yao Yao looked over. After so many years, she was actually reunited with him here. Chapter 1550. You had to admit that there were always people who stood out from the crowd and would invisibly become the focus of attention. Even in the boundless sea of people, people would still recognize them at a glance. They were different from the masses. This was the transcendent temperament, incomparable grace, and exceptional style. Unfortunately, these words weren't from other people's praise but from Chu Feng himself. He was praising himself. That's right, he was praising himself. For a moment, the heaven and earth were quiet and everyone shut their mouths. Even a shameless person like Old Gu was flabbergasted. He really wanted to ask Chu Feng, brother, are you shameless? Do you not want it any more? If this was spoken by someone else, it would undoubtedly be the highest affirmation and praise for Chu Feng. However, the taste was completely different when he was reduced to selling melons himself. Originally, the distant Long Diu still wanted to join in on the liveliness, greet him, show off his face in front of a true immortal and ultimate creature, but now, he directly turned his head around, as if he didn't know him. Even a strange dragon with thick skin like him felt like his skin was too thin, blushing from embarrassment. Chu Feng didn't pay attention to the others. He did things his own way, and he didn't care what others thought or thought. He lived for himself, and it wasn't that his mouth was cheap. It was only because everyone was staring at him that he spoke as he pleased. He looked at Yao Yao with joy in his heart and also the lingering charm of the great sorrow from back then. He finally saw her. She had actually come out of the abyss that made people despair and come to him alive. Yao Yao, he called out. However, Yao Yao's state was very special. She still remembered him, but some problems arose after she found her true body that had fallen into the abyss and merged with it. The current her hadn't completely returned, but in general, she hadn't forgotten Chu Feng. She smiled brilliantly and the whole world brightened up. She was about to come over. However, at this moment, boundless killing intent engulfed the sky and the earth. If Chu Feng didn't have the protection of the stone jar, he might have been provoked by the killing intent and wouldn't be able to stand here. That was the martial madman. He had locked onto Chu Feng. How many people could survive being targeted by an ultimate entity? Chu Feng had come here to save Yao Yao. He was afraid that she would die in the hands of the martial emperor, but now he himself had fallen into a desperate situation? He was fearless and not worried, because he had a certain level of confidence in his heart. Chi. At this moment, Yao Yao's eyes revealed a divine radiance. Multicolored light gushed out from her right hand and condensed into an immortal sword. She pointed it straight at the space between the martial emperor's eyebrows and wanted to attack the peerless emperor from the Yang realm. However, the martial monarch was not suppressing his cultivation level. He was releasing his ultimate aura. He clasped his hands behind his back and didn't speak to Chu Feng. He looked down on him as if he were an ant. At his level, if he wanted to kill someone, he didn't need to be convicted, nor did he need a reason. He just had to kill. This was his domineering attitude of looking down on the world and ignoring the rules of the human world. This young man had been the enemy of his bloodline time and time again. He had even killed his descendant, Li Chuntian, on 3 battlefields. It should be known that at that time, Li Chuntian had used Emperor Wu's famous secret technique, the 7 Deaths technique, and had even activated the simplified version of the Scripture of Time, slaying 1,000 autumns. In the end, even the armor that Emperor Wu had worn when he was young was revealed by Li Chentian, but he was still defeated. That battle represented the defeat of Emperor Wu's bloodline. In addition, Chu Feng had also killed the martial madman's grand disciple, Lord Taiwu. Now, after seeing this young man, the martial madman had no more misgivings. Runes circulated in the depths of his eyes as he was about to activate his killing intent and obliterate Chu Feng directly. Without a sound, the yellow-toothed old man behind Yao Yao stood in front of the martial monarch like a ghost and resisted the killing intent. Since he was Yao Yao's old friend, he naturally had to protect him. No one knew better than this yellow-toothed old man how terrifying the killing intent of a true immortal was. Chu Feng sighed. He was here to save Yao Yao, not to be saved. Otherwise, he wouldn't have offended the narrow-minded Emperor of Dogs for nothing if he didn't curse the dog and invite it to come out of seclusion without giving it a chance to show its face. Moreover, in order to deal with the martial madman this time, he had successfully provoked his old son's anger and could bite back at him at any time. If he couldn't make use of that rotten corpse this time, wouldn't he have taken the risk for nothing? Thus, he wasn't afraid of the martial madman making a move. Don't stop him. Let him come. Let's see who can stand against me today. Chu Feng boasted shamelessly and challenged him to a fight. Someone laughed coldly as a crescent blade flew over. It spun and cut through the void to cut Chu Feng in half. Who do you think the martial monarch is? How dare you disrespect him? I'm going to teach you lawless juniors a lesson on behalf of the martial monarch. This person was from the Yuan clan and was naturally a mortal enemy of Chu Feng. He took advantage of this opportunity to find an excuse to teach Chu Feng a lesson on behalf of the martial monarch, but in reality, he was going to kill him on behalf of his own clan. Under such circumstances, the one who dared to make a move wasn't a weakling. It was a famous powerhouse from the Yuan clan who was infinitely close to the great grade. After some time, he might become a great primordial chaos expert. Not long ago, Chu Feng had killed a celestial venerable and even fought against an almighty expert. Everyone knew about this. However, this person from the Yuan clan was absolutely confident that Chu Feng couldn't deal with an evolver at the Great Origin realm. Thus he had come, controlling the crescent blade to attack Chu Feng. Unfortunately, he had found the wrong opponent. In the eyes of outsiders, it hadn't been long since Chu Feng had left and returned. His strength couldn't have changed much. However, they didn't know that Chu Feng had just completed his super evolution with the help of the strange seed. Not only did he have 2 eternal venerables, but he had also almost broken through to the almighty realm and could enter at any time. Chu Feng took the initiative to meet the attack. 12 wings appeared on his back, emitting a dazzling golden light that shot into the sky like a Kuan Ping spreading its wings. The 12 wings covered the sky and split the earth, soaring 90,000 miles in an unstoppable manner. With a cracking sound, the crescent blade exploded on the spot. It was struck by a golden Kuan Ping wing and turned into hundreds of pieces. An almighty level weapon had been easily destroyed by a young man. It was beyond everyone's imagination. Most importantly, the Kuan Ping wings spread out and released a sea of lightning that drowned the Yuan clan expert who was close to the Great Origin realm. It was as if heavenly lightning had struck him violently. The wings didn't grow on Chu Feng's body. Instead, they appeared around him as the runes in his body circulated. They were the condensation of order. Rumble! A deafening sound rang out. The 12 Kuan Ping wings rotated, sending the incoming Yuan clan expert flying. Moreover, his body was blasted into pieces, directly smashing apart and almost exploding. You dare to oppose me? I'm here to kill a martial monarch, shouted Chu Feng. Then, he charged forward and the Almighty was instantly blown to pieces, dying a violent death. These words could be considered arrogant, but his current display of power made many people's expressions change. Hadn't he just left not long ago? How could he kill an entity close to the great origin realm just after returning? Chu Feng was bathed in the radiant energy. Even his hair was resplendent as if it was burning. He stood in the air, looking disdainfully in all directions. He had dealt such a heavy blow because the Yuan clan and he were mortal enemies. Their enmity couldn't be resolved. Now that they had dared to bully him, he naturally wouldn't let them off. Apart from that, the Yuan clan was also the main culprit behind the destruction of the Yao Yao clan. Yao Yao's ancestor, heavenly venerable Yushang, was a descendant of the celestial emperor. But how pitiful! Almost all of his descendants had been wiped out. Only the Yao Yao bloodline had survived in the lesser Yin realm. Now, Chu Feng had the urge to tell Yao Yao that the archenemy of their race, the race with which they had a blood feud, was right here. However, Chu Feng held back. After all, he didn't know how strong Yao Yao's confidence was. Moreover, the Yuan clan had two unfathomable ultimate entities. It would be best if he didn't cause trouble for Yao Yao and told her in private. Not far away, the Yuan clan was shocked. A row of people came out, and there were even entities close to the ultimate level. They opened their eyes and stared at Chu Feng, ready to kill. With a swoosh, Yao Yao swooped down and blocked that powerful entity. Chu Feng sneered and turned into a beam of light. 12 Kunping wings flapped around him and appeared in all directions. He immediately charged toward the Yuan clan. Moreover, his eyes lit up along the way and transformed into 2 immortal swords that slashed forward. At the same time, it was as if he had 3 heads and 6 arms. His energy and aura rose sharply. Of course, this wasn't a real scene. It was the appearance of a strange phenomenon. The extra arms and heads were all formed from runes. Even so, his aura was flourishing and extremely powerful. He broke into the group of powerhouses at a speed that surpassed the limit. Bang! 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 In just a split second, he killed 4 powerhouses. He used his divine wings to smash them, his fists to pierce them, and the immortal swords in his eyes to cut them into pieces. This was too shocking. Humph! A cold and emotionless snort came out. The martial emperor moved. He was too powerful and pushed aside the yellow-toothed old man's obstruction. He pointed out with a finger and was about to kill Chu Feng. However, at this time, a divine temple appeared. Someone had arrived and blocked his path. Moreover, a black hand appeared behind the martial emperor. It was carrying a square seal and was about to smash the back of his head. The martial madman's expression changed. He evaded the divine temple and was seething with anger. He turned around to look at the black hand behind him and wanted to fight to the death. But the next moment, he was scared. He saw a short old man in tattered ancient clothes coming over on endless time particles. The old man stared at him and made him feel as if he was being locked on by a ferocious beast. He felt a chill run down his spine. Next, the martial madman trembled and turned around to flee. Everyone was shaken. Who was that short old man? How could he scare the martial emperor into fleeing? It was simply unimaginable. A book friend asked about the update. He braced himself and explained that the reason was the same. He had disappeared from the network some time ago to repair his body. Just like last year, his physical condition wasn't that great. Now that he was a little better, he immediately returned and worked hard to update the holy ground and write the concluding chapter. Chapter 1551. The martial madman had fled. Such a powerful and fierce person, who was known as the martial emperor in prehistoric times, had actually turned tail and fled after seeing an old man covered in rotting clothes. This was too shocking. For a moment, everyone was stunned and petrified. Then, they were horrified and felt as if they were about to suffocate. In everyone's impression, the martial madman was domineering, fierce, and invincible. Just hearing his name would make anyone tremble. This was a terrifying creature that could shake the ancients and dazzle the contemporaries. What had happened now? Who was that short old man covered in old clothes? He fled as soon as he arrived. Chu Feng was also stunned. What was going on? The people he was waiting for hadn't even made a move, so why did three great experts suddenly appear? One of them was even more terrifying than the god of plagues, comparable to the Soul River and the most ancient monster in the underworld. Did he scare off the martial madman with his appearance? It wasn't the dog emperor, nor was it the rotten corpse. At the same time, it wasn't the nine Daoi. The few of them hadn't shown themselves, but three other evil gods had come. This was too unexpected, so Chu Feng was dumbfounded and didn't know what to say for a moment. At the same time, some people also came back to their senses. The first thing they felt was numbness on their scalps, as they had a premonition that something big had happened. Some people even glanced at Chu Feng. This young man wasn't simple. He was just about to make a move against Chu Feng, but three creatures that could suppress the Yang realm had actually made their move. Among the three great saints, two of them could still be estimated and their origins could be guessed. In particular, Chu Feng had come into contact with two of them. The first person who drove the Divine Temple over was the one who came from the back mountain where the Ji clan resided when Chu Feng first came to the Yang realm, the Divine Temple Fairy. Sure enough, he vaguely saw two people standing in the hazy temple. One of them was as ethereal as a fairy, quite otherworldly and untainted by the flames of the mortal world. It was that fairy. The current her was completely different from before. She had completely awakened her past life and opened up her divine kingdom and heavenly kingdom on earth to absorb infinite power and strengthen her body. Chu Feng had an impression that when he was reincarnated from Earth and returned to the world of the living, he seemed to have seen the imprint left by the fairy of the temple at the end of the ancient temple. This was a taboo existence that had left its name in the Samsara palace with its memories. In reality, what the divine temple fairy had awakened was not just a simple past life, but a complete understanding of the past. She had chased after several lifetimes and understood what she had gained from reincarnation. Beside the divine temple fairy, there was a very sturdy person with a wide mouth and a big waist. She was actually also a woman. She was none other than Dong Qing, who had taken good care of Chu Feng in the past. At that time, he had changed his name to Jidade. Chu Feng wished he could call her sister Dongqing on the spot. He was simply too intimate with her. The other expert was carrying a square seal and had attacked the martial madman from behind. Chu Feng didn't even need to think to know that it was Li Su. Even if this person's skills were unparalleled and he was invincible in the world, there were some habits that could not be changed. For example, he liked to hit people from behind. Especially when he was facing the martial madman, he had committed more than one or two crimes. He had almost become a habitual offender. Therefore, after the martial madman was blocked and attacked, he did not have any extreme reaction when facing the divine temple fairy. He was still quite arrogant and indifferent. However, when Li Sanlong appeared, the martial madman immediately exploded. He could no longer remain calm and turned around to fight him with all his might. It was as if he wanted to fight to the death. However, Chu Feng was a little surprised. Why was Li Daishu here? He was not called, especially since this guy did not have much contact with Chu Feng on the surface. It's over. I've wasted my energy. I've been praying in my heart and visualizing Li Dahe. I've even scolded him and said that I'm going to die before I invited him over. Just as I was about to attack the martial madman, someone intervened. Isn't this a waste of the emotions I've invested? It won't be so easy to call him next time. Old Gu was swinging his arms and muttering to himself. He looked as if he was deeply grieved. Everyone was dumbfounded when they heard this. He was the one who called him over? Everyone was shocked and a little afraid. This useless Gu Chenhai, who always claimed that his big brother was Li Su, could actually invite Li Daishu over at any time? The way some people looked at him suddenly changed. It was true that the kind of person who brought disaster would walk together with the kind of monster. It was no wonder that he became friends with Chu Feng. When these two became anxious, they could even attract a terrifying existence. Their roots were indeed unfathomable. Chu Feng was a little speechless. He more or less understood old Gu's feelings. It was just like how he scolded a dog, or how he bit the bullet to deceive an old son. He had clearly invited those two, but in the end, someone else did the work for him. He was especially unwilling. Why? Chu Feng felt that he had already taken a great risk. Not everyone could scold a dog. When the dog turned hostile and ruthlessly bit people, who could stop it? He was taking the risk of being bitten for several lifetimes. Moreover, after being targeted by that dog, it was a small matter if he didn't die, but it was likely that he wouldn't be able to rest for many lifetimes. The martial madman fled, and he fled in a hurry. He shattered the heaven and earth with a kick, pierced through the void, and escaped by riding the river of time. He was completely startled by the short old man. They had never seen such an anxious and flustered martial emperor. The performance of this strong man was too unimaginable, and it shocked and frightened everyone. Who was this short old man? Everyone wanted to know. Unexpectedly, just when everyone thought that the martial emperor had disappeared and would never be seen again, the river of time became chaotic, the heaven and earth turned upside down, the day turned into night, and all the rivers on the ground flowed towards the sky. The martial madman retreated and came back. It was as if there was an invisible hand pulling him back, forcibly restraining him, and making him walk backward from the broken void. Damn! This is simply frightening to death. Everyone was horrified and scared. Who was that? That was the martial madman who had shaken the ages, and he was actually in such a state. They could see that he was really walking backward, and his speed was incomparably fast. He had returned the same way he escaped. At this moment, not to mention the others, even the goddess of the divine temple was incomparably afraid. She steered the divine temple away from the clouds and retreated to the horizon, cautiously watching this place. The fallen true immortals and the decaying great cosmos-level beings were also terrified, and they couldn't help but flee backward, as if they were fleeing from the most terrifying ghost god they had seen for several eras. Even Li Su, the prehistoric Dark Hand, hesitated for a moment before leaving the place with the square seal. Of course, he didn't show himself at all. Instead, he stretched out a thick arm from the endless void, holding the black seal and slapping people. This was also the representation and embodiment of strength. His real body hadn't appeared, but a thick black hand dared to target the infamous martial emperor in the history of the Yang realm. Before Li Su retreated, his big black hand returned to old Gu and gently touched his head a few times. Then, he directly slapped him 3 times. Old Gu felt wronged, and he almost jumped up and cursed. "You're my big brother, so why did you slap the back of my head for no reason? I'll fight you to the death." However, the big black hand slapped him again, and it was very dissatisfied. It admonished him. What era was it now? The world was about to be destroyed, and an era was about to come to an end. How could he, Li Su, have the time to meddle in other people's business? He was in the middle of breaking through, so don't disturb him if there's nothing important. Old Gu immediately became listless. He had suffered a few slaps for nothing, but he couldn't say anything. At this time and place, it could be said that one could hear a pin drop. Everyone's eyes were focused on the martial madman and the little old man. The martial emperor of a generation had actually been pulled back like a marionette. It truly shocked the world, and many people were frightened. Everyone stared at him, especially at the short old man who was cautiously peeking at him. What made people uneasy was that the more they looked at the old man, the more confused they felt. It was as if he would disappear with the wind at any time, as if he didn't exist in this world anymore. It was too strange. This creature was absolutely strange, and he was ridiculously powerful. He looked like he had just crawled out of a grave, and his body was indeed covered with soil. He gave off a very ancient feeling, as if he didn't belong to this era at all. The clothes on his body were very special. Upon closer inspection, they were woven and refined with materials that were difficult to find in the world. For example, the silk spun by the 9 revolutions in silkworm, and the metal silk thread extracted from the mother gold. But now, they had long rotted and were about to be destroyed. Those were definitely battle clothes that were rarely seen since ancient times, but they had rotted to the point of disappearing. Just how many years had they experienced? Although he was very short, and looked like a creature that had awakened from a grave, and even his face was covered with soil, making it hard to see his appearance clearly, he still shocked the world. At the same time, people also noticed that under the feet of the short old man, as well as around him, there were dense time particles, and the river of time surrounded him. Back then, you were the one who almost woke me up, weren't you? You had nothing better to do and randomly dug with a hammer, and you even chiseled through the hill I was sleeping on? The short old man spoke unhurriedly as he stared at the martial madman. The ancient language he spoke was very special. No one had heard of it before, and no one knew which era it belonged to. Even the prehistoric creatures didn't understand it, but everyone understood it in an instant. That was because there was a powerful divine will contained within it, and there was no obstruction in communication. In just a split second, some of the quick-witted old monsters were stunned. They quickly came to their senses and vaguely knew where he came from. Back then, the martial madman and Li Su had a great battle. They fought for a long time and used more than 800 divine abilities and secret arts, but in the end, the martial monarch was defeated and had to retreat. He wasn't willing to accept this. He believed that his innate talent was unrivaled, and as long as he had a peerless cultivation art to learn, he would be unrivaled throughout the ages. As such, he went to dig up famed mountains in search of lost arts. He wanted to obtain the supreme arts ranked in the top 3 throughout the ages and cultivate an invincible body. After that, there was a rumor that he had really dug up a supreme art from a famed mountain after narrowly escaping death, the scripture of time. It was said that the martial madman had really almost died at that time. His body was tattered and covered in blood. He escaped from several famed mountains and finally obtained something. Now, this matter was connected. The main character had come to capture the martial monarch. F***ck. Heavens! At this moment, not to mention others, even the fallen true immortals and the ultimate experts from the most ancient times felt their heads swell. They were completely scared out of their wit. It was very difficult to imagine which era this short old man was from and which era he belonged to. He was actually the master of the scripture of time. Digging up famed mountains was inauspicious, and it might provoke forbidden creatures. This kind of legend had long since existed in prehistoric times. As such, although there were many famed mountains in the Yang realm, not many great sects and sects dared to completely occupy them. Even the 10 great orthodoxies of the Yang realm, including the Buddhist race and the Hing race, had to pay the price of blood to occupy their current treasured mountains. Meanwhile, in the Yang realm, although there were some mountains that had been silent and declined for countless eras, no one had ever touched them. They didn't dare ascend them because they felt apprehensive. Now, the rumors had come true. Famed mountains were inauspicious and really couldn't be dug up. The old man was right. No wonder there's a saying that the Yang realm is a land of corpses, but it's also a land of the sun. It really isn't an empty legend. An old monster was horrified. He muttered inwardly as he thought of this rumor. You took away the unfinished and almost rotten manuscript that I left on the stone table in the belly of the mountain, right? Stealing it is fine, but why did you disturb my nap and disturb my dreams? The old man said softly. However, this was like a clap of thunder in everyone's ears. That was an ancient matter from prehistoric times, yet he thought it was just a small dream. It lasted until now, but just how long did he sleep for? Chapter 1552. The short old man's voice wasn't loud and seemed to be murmuring beside everyone's ears. However, those were the laws, the embodiment of the supreme order. It made everyone's soul light flourish, but their bodies were ice cold and they kept quiet out of fear. He was very ordinary and seemed to be covered in dirt, but he intimidated the heavens and the earth. Regardless of whether it was the fallen true immortals, the rotting cosmos-level entities, or the old ultimate experts, all of them felt like their scalps were about to explode as they felt an incomparable pressure. Especially at this moment, the fearless martial madman, the vicious man known as the martial emperor, had rapidly returned to the battlefield, adding to the strange atmosphere. What era is this? After a short nap, I don't know what year it is when I wake up. Don't be afraid, I won't hurt anyone. Just do what you need to do and don't worry about me. The short old man spoke in a friendly manner. Moreover, he seemed to have realized something. His murmuring was no longer the strongest Tao law reverberating and had returned to normal. Afterward, everyone felt that the soul light was no longer flourishing and was no longer shining mysteriously. Everything had returned to normal. At the same time, they had a feeling that he wasn't speaking empty words. He wasn't trying to intimidate them and didn't come with evil intentions. Just how many years had he slept for? Just a short nap and he had transcended eras to the present? No one dared to reply to him. They were truly afraid of this untraceable entity. It was too frightening. Even if it was just his aura, it would most likely cause great karma. At the same time, the next moment, everyone felt somewhat alarmed. They had seen something. The martial madman's face was as pale as a sheet of paper. He was extremely afraid of this old man. Duo! The short old man lightly shouted and pointed forward with his right hand. A hazy light enveloped the martial emperor and completely enshrouded him. Since you've learned the scripture of time, it's also fate. I suddenly comprehended more in my sleep and have a complete chapter. Come with me, I'll pass it all to you. What kind of character was the martial madman? He was tyrannical and unrivaled. He had never submitted to anyone, so he naturally wouldn't give up without a fight. He fiercely resisted, but it was to no avail. He shrunk at a speed visible to the naked eye and turned from a bronze-colored vicious man, a ferocious man, and a martial emperor into a child. This shocked everyone. No one could believe their eyes. This old man had casually pointed at a martial monarch and turned him into a child. How could the current martial monarch still have the domineering attitude of soaring to the heavens and swallowing the universe? He became a young man with rosy lips and white teeth, who was even younger than Chu Feng. When a few prehistoric old monsters saw this scene for the first time, seeing the great vicious individual turn into a child, they instinctively wanted to laugh, but in that instant their entire bodies went ice-cold, from head to toe. This was just too horrifying. Even a martial monarch could not resist. They did not even have the ability to struggle. If it were them, they would most likely be in an even worse situation. The few fallen true immortals with the strongest postures also felt their scalps go numb. They felt as if their soul light was about to explode. What kind of mighty power was this? It was able to knead a martial emperor at the peak of the true immortal realm as he wished. It was truly the most terrifying matter. Let's go. I'm lacking an apprentice. Since you woke me up from my nap, then it can be considered fate. Follow me back to the mountain and prepare to face the great calamity of a new era. The short old man spoke. With a shake of his hand, he tossed the short green robe over and was about to land on the martial madman's body. Crazy, everyone felt that this was too crazy. A martial monarch from the Yang realm was about to be taken away as an apprentice. The shock made everyone feel a little dizzy, and even their soul light was about to tremble. I'd rather die than be free, the martial madman roared. However, he was now in the form of a child, so no matter how one looked at him, he lacked some imposing manner. He had been enlightened by someone. From an emperor with a world-shaking spirit, he was reduced to a child. The corners of his eyes were about to split, and he was seething with anger. The martial madman let out a long cry. His whole body shone brilliantly as he deduced the sequence of time. After that, he grew at a speed visible to the naked eye and once again transformed into a robust young man. Oh, there's a knack! You combined that girl's technique in such a short time and deduced the rotten and incomplete parts of my scripture of time. Not simple. You have comprehension. The short old man nodded. At the same time, when he spoke again, he highly praised the Tao of time that Yao Yao had grasped. That must have come from the hands of the celestial emperor, as expected of a technique deduced by a truly outstanding person with great achievement. Admirable. How extraordinary. I can vaguely see the figure of a supreme being living in this technique. These words caused everyone who heard them to stare blankly. They were all deeply shocked. This was because they were at a different height, so the scenery they saw was also different. There was a supreme being living in this technique? Chi. The old man pointed once again. The martial madman's struggle was meaningless as he immediately turned into a Tao child. This time, he was very thorough and even wore a Taoist robe. He's a little cute. The strange dragon's mouth was cheap as he spoke sneakily. Moreover, he winked at Chu Feng and old Gu from afar. This extremely daring dragon was the only one who dared to speak so recklessly. If he's not crazy, he's indeed a cute and beautiful child. Old Gu nodded seriously. He had been suppressed by the martial madman before. Old Gu was especially narrow-minded and naturally bore a grudge. Now, he couldn't help but have a cheap mouth. Everyone was speechless. There's no need to let it go. Seriously speaking, your lineage and my lineage might have crawled out from the same pit. So, you and I are fated. Come, silly child. The short old man spoke kindly and persuaded the martial madman to return to his seat. This shocked everyone. Crawled out from the same pit? Some people vaguely knew the roots of the martial madman's sect. They were horrified. They could even encounter it like this. Some fallen true immortals sighed. There were many famous mountains in the Yang realm, and some of them were indeed untouchable and unapproachable. Millions of miles away, beyond the Yang realm, in a certain void, the dog emperor was deep in thought. The rotten corpse patted his shoulder and said, "Do you know the main route? Is it related to the celestial emperor you follow? At the same time, he's the one who uses the scripture of time." The dog emperor had been guarding the celestial emperor's corpse with a broken bell. Its master was a powerhouse at the level of the originator of the time law. In addition, the celestial emperor lying in the bronze coffin had also performed the scripture of time. He started with a certain secret technique and gradually advanced to the highest level. This master is a little rotten. He might even be older than you and me. The dog emperor whispered. He couldn't see through this person's roots and origins. In front of the two-realm battlefield, the short old man whispered, "Everyone, sorry to disturb you. You can continue. You really don't need to mind me. Just pretend I didn't come." As he spoke, he walked toward the martial madman, wanting to lift him up and take him away. Chu Feng didn't say a word throughout the whole process. He watched quietly, but now his hair suddenly stood on end. The back of his head hurt as if it was being pricked by needles. His soul light flickered violently. At once, the runes on his body flickered and performed. He had just finished metamorphosing not long ago, so all the divine abilities and the wonderful seven treasures technique he possessed were unleashed at the same time. With a boom, his blood chi surged and formed a large bell outside his body. It was inscribed with all kinds of runes, and he covered himself in the bell to protect himself. Almost at the same time, a blood-colored arrow shot over and hit the large bell. It let out an earth-shattering noise and almost penetrated the bell. Even the sky was blown apart. This arrow was accompanied by an incomparably astonishing energy. A mushroom cloud erupted, and it was enough to shoot down the sun and stars, shocking the world. Even the protective bell that was as strong as Chu Feng's, which condensed the essence and cultivation of his entire body, had disintegrated and shattered. It was conceivable that he would have been shot to death if he had been slightly slower. One had to know that Chu Feng had done everything he could. He had transformed all his divine abilities and wonderful techniques into runes and constructed a large bell. Even so, the body of the bell was still penetrated by someone. However, this was enough to buy him some time. In the instant the body of the bell disintegrated and exploded, he had already moved his body to the side and avoided the arrow that penetrated the back of his head. Reincarnation Road's transformation god arrow? Someone said with a trembling voice. He was very frightened. The so-called transformation god arrow came from the reincarnation road and could melt anyone's divine soul. If it really hit, Chu Feng would die without a doubt. Even his true spirit would not be able to escape. At this moment, Chu Feng suddenly turned around and stared at a certain area. He was really angry. Not long ago, the martial madman had not been able to attack him. Li Su and the fairy from the divine temple had appeared and blocked the attack for him. Under such circumstances, there was still someone who dared to kill him and plot against him. Did this mean that they did not care and regarded him as an ant that could be killed at any time? This was really shocking courage and incomparably vicious. They had made up their minds to destroy him and would not give him the slightest chance to kill him. Fortunately, he had metamorphosed this time and became even stronger. His evolved spiritual senses were sharper and sublimated to the extreme, allowing him to sense fatal danger in advance. Otherwise, he might have died. At this moment, everyone was shocked and felt that it was inconceivable. One had to know that the short old man who had created the scripture of time had not left yet. Although he had said not to care about him, in this kind of atmosphere, to actually dare to directly attack in front of him was too bold. As expected, the short old man was also a little surprised. He looked at a certain blurry void passage and said, "Someone from the reincarnation road, no wonder." Boom. Chu Feng charged over and did not say anything. This time, he directly raised his blade. It was the snow-white and incomparably sharp blade transformed from the seed. Light surged like a sea of stars, and also like millions of lightning bolts. He held the blade and slashed it forward. There was no confrontation and no argument. A bitter battle had begun. There were many powerhouses there, and they were a row of people who had walked out of the reincarnation path. In the end, Chu Feng closed in on them and started a massacre. Blood splashed everywhere and heads flew. This time, Chu Feng was really angry. The people on the reincarnation road really looked down on him too much. They didn't take him seriously and wanted to kill him casually. In addition, Evenly Black Hand and the fairy from the divine temple had not left, but they already attacked him. Did they think he would not be protected by others? Kill! Chu Feng was furious. He raised his blade and charged into the reincarnation road, killing his way inside. This time, everyone was dumbfounded. This youth surnamed Chu was really too demonic. He actually started a massacre in this kind of situation and wanted to steal the limelight of the creator of the scripture of time? Hiss! At this time, the short old man who had walked out from the famed mountains looked at the reincarnation road and actually inhaled a breath of cold air. That person! These two simple words similarly possessed an incomparable demonic nature. People immediately thought that the person he was talking about could only be that person. Chapter 1553. The short elder who had revived from the famed mountains and beaten the martial madman into a Tao child actually had this kind of expression and attitude. He was full of shock and had even mentioned that person. How could this not make everyone tremble? They were all greatly alarmed. I sense that person's power. It's him. He spoke once again. His words were absolutely shocking and could even be said to be earth-shattering. He actually spoke of that person's energy fluctuations in the depths of reincarnation with such certainty. That person had left behind too many legends, but they were only circulated among the world's most powerful true immortals and ultimate creatures. Most other evolved beings didn't have the qualifications to know about it. This existence was too special. For some reason, the entire world had almost forgotten about him and couldn't retain any memories of him in their hearts. Now, someone was saying that he was in the depths of the reincarnation road? Even the martial emperor didn't struggle and temporarily became silent. A vicious person like him, who wasn't willing to be subdued, also wanted to know about that person's secrets. The people present naturally didn't forget that there was an expert who had charged in earlier. It was precisely the spear-wielding old monster from the first mountain, Jiudaui. 9 coffins, it's truly hair-raising. If they were separated and born in different eras, each of them would have the ability to reign supreme throughout the ages. How formidable! The time particles were dense and wrapped around the short elder. He actually sighed with emotion and further revealed the unfathomable, deep waters of the reincarnation road. At this time, there was another person who was extremely ferocious and violent. That was Chu Feng. He charged into the reincarnation road alone and forcefully charged in. He raised his long blade and swept through the reincarnation road. It was truly too astonishing. He followed the indistinct reincarnation road and blocked the troops that were charging out. He took the initiative to slaughter them. Pooh! A great expert was beheaded. When the snow-white long blade streaked past, it illuminated the dusky reincarnation road and made everyone tremble in fear. This was too unyielding and fierce. This group of reincarnation hunters were all great experts. There wasn't a single weakling among them. This was a strengthened version of the law enforcer. They crossed the reincarnation road and were transported here. "You dare!" shouted a large silver rat. It was half the size of a human and all skin and bones, but its fur was shiny. It held a blood-colored spear and stabbed towards Chu Feng. Among the reincarnation hunters, there weren't many who had self-awareness and were relatively clear-headed. This big rat was clearly not ordinary. It even knew how to berate and intimidate. There were very few humanoid creatures in this team. There were half-human, half-snake monsters, and 3-headed, 6-armed mechanical Buddhas. They were all very strange, ranging from flesh and blood creatures to metal life forms. However, there was one thing in common, and that was that they were all very strong. These were elite hunters, and one of the blonde creatures held a large bow in her hands. Just now, she was the one who shot the soul formation arrow. She had a very beautiful face, and her golden hair made her look like a sun goddess. Her flesh was rarely full, and she exuded a divine pressure. This was a creature that had almost become a great primordial chaos. The upper half of her body was that of a human, while the lower half was that of a scorpion. Her appearance was terrifying and strange. The corresponding realm of an almighty was primordial chaos, and this woman was close to the great primordial chaos. She was very tricky. Now, she drew her bow again and aimed at Chu Feng. Clang, clang, clang. Behind Chu Feng, 5 beams of divine light shot into the sky. That was the development of the wonderful 7 treasures technique. Currently, he had obtained 5 kinds of rare materials of heaven and earth, and he developed the rotation of the 5 light. It was like 5 immortal swords being unsheathed, and it was like a peacock spreading its tail feathers to sweep through the universe. The soul formation arrow shot over again, piercing through the void with monstrous energy. It made the reincarnation road unstable and violently shook. This time, Chu Feng was prepared, so he was naturally fearless. The 5 beams of auspicious light behind him rushed forward like an immortal sword slashing the spring wind. It was ethereal, divine, and powerful. Amidst the clanging sounds, the glaring blood-colored light was blocked on the spot. Then, it was sliced into pieces and exploded in the end. At the same time, Chu Feng's 3 heads and 6 arms appeared, and the 12 Kuanping wings unfolded. In addition to his fiery eyes, he attacked the surrounding Almighty. This was simply like the arrival of a demon god. He was unstoppable and completely let go of himself. The last half of his heel was almost completely in the realm of Almighty, and his energy aura skyrocketed. A terrifying whirlwind formed around Chu Feng. It seemed to be able to stir up the starry sky and pull the mountains and rivers. It was extremely terrifying. He moved and closed. Bang! He sent a monster with a human head and a snake's body flying with one punch, and then it exploded in midair. How brutal and domineering was this? He had blown up an almighty with one punch, and the long saber in his other hand had directly slashed two almighty. The saber light flickered and swept through the world. It was reflected through the reincarnation road like a galaxy hanging upside down in the world. It was too dazzling. Even the pupils of the martial madman in the distance shrank. He believed that among his own disciples, if they were to fight at the same realm, they would be far inferior to this youth. But how long had this youth surnamed Chu cultivated? The martial emperor was also asking himself if he could suppress this demon Chu Feng when he was young. Clang! A purple spear stabbed over, but in the end Chu Feng blocked it with a finger. Then, he suddenly exerted force and broke the spear with a crack. He was circulating the robbery induction breathing technique. His mouth and nose were full of white mist, and when he opened his mouth, a golden energy gushed out. It turned into runes and turned into special sound waves that whistled forward. With a bang, an almighty exploded. It was equivalent to being roared to death by Chu Feng. Half of the body of another almighty was also shattered by the golden rune energy. It was tattered, and his whole body was sent flying. It seemed that he was on the verge of death. It was too brutal. Everyone was astonished. Why was this demon Chu Feng, who had left not long ago, so much stronger than before? Boom! It was another punch, and this time it was the explosion of the ultimate fist seal. Chu Feng hit until the blurry reincarnation path was almost broken. He attacked the hunter and killed the big silver rat. The Almighty's corpse was shattered into pieces. It was a very terrifying scene. The long saber in his hand swept across and immediately forced a group of people to retreat. Along the way, he cut off another head. The saber light was like a tsunami crashing against the shore, shaking the entire space. With a boom, Chu Feng rushed over like a bolt of lightning and locked onto the golden-haired woman with the big bow. This was an expert infinitely close to the great origin chaos realm. In an instant, there were tens of thousands of saber lights as Chu Feng continuously slashed and split the sky. The reincarnation path that was illuminated here was corroded and about to disintegrate. Obviously, this woman was not simple. She was very powerful. After shooting a few arrows, she quickly took out dozens of flying swords and turned them into a sword rain to stop Chu Feng. The other almighties attacked again, surrounding him in a formation. Tao patterns were densely packed, and they were all nomological runes. They wanted to refine him together. What a fierce person! I've never seen such a brutal youth who dares to enter the reincarnation path and kill almighty hunters. He's so proactive and domineering. Back when Li Sanlong was dissatisfied with the reincarnation hunters, he only secretly killed some of them but didn't leave any evidence. This youth, on the other hand, doesn't rest until he's dead in front of everyone. He's killing hunters. His courage is praiseworthy. Shu, lower your voice. Li Blackhand might not have gone far. Don't talk about him, or the back of your head will be smashed. Without a doubt, Chu Feng was the focus of everyone's attention. Even the short elder, the creator of the Times scripture from the famed mountain, had been robbed of his limelight. Chu Feng was furious. He had been targeted by the beings of the reincarnation path again and again. They wanted to eliminate him. Since that was the case, what else did he not dare to do? He would just face them head-on and kill them. At this time, two more people appeared noiselessly in the two-realm battlefield. Only a few people noticed them, such as the short elder from the famed mountain. These two could be considered the two strongest immortals of the Yuan race in the Yang realm. One was an ultimate ancestor who had lived for an incomparably long time, and the other was a peerless expert who had become a great universe-level entity in recent times. Both had great origins. They silently saluted the short elder. Even the two strongest immortals of the Yuan race didn't dare show any disrespect. The short elder nodded and didn't say anything. He stared at the depths of the reincarnation path and saw the 9 coffins. He also saw many other things and was studying them. Ancestor. The people of the Yuan race were astonished, delighted, and shaken. The Yuan race's strongest combat power had actually personally descended. Immediately, someone reported to the two that an outstanding character from their race, who might have become a great origin realm expert, had been killed. They looked toward Chu Feng. Ancestor, how about I go and kill him? Someone asked in a low voice. This was a top character from the Yuan race who was close to the ultimate realm. He had wanted to attack not long ago but had been stopped by Yao Yao. Now that he saw the two immortals arrive, he was prepared to kill Chu Feng no matter what. That was because, at present, the youth's potential was too great. He would certainly become a great threat in the future. How old was Chu Feng? He could already fight a great origin realm entity. Just kill him. The Yuan race expert who had achieved Dao in recent times and was at the great universe level spoke for the first time. He had the appearance of a middle-aged man. His hair was thick and his face was incomparably cold. His eyes were like an icehouse devoid of any emotion. After speaking, he didn't want others to attack. Instead, he wanted to kill Chu Feng himself. He extended a finger and was about to point at the center of the reincarnation path. He was a great universe-level entity, so it was too easy for him to kill powerhouses. If he really attacked, even a great origin realm expert wouldn't be able to stop him. This person was very powerful and frightening. For a moment, his entire body was sparkling and translucent as energy surged along his finger. Damn your grandpa! At this time, the old man cried out in alarm and couldn't help but curse his grandpa. That was because he discovered that Li Dahe wasn't here. He didn't know where he had retreated to. Could it be that he had left? How could he block this attack? At the same time, the fairy from the divine temple was on the horizon. She was afraid of the old man who had created the scripture of time. If she wasn't close, she probably wouldn't be able to block this fatal attack. In a flash, someone moved. Yao Yao made her move. Positive and negative temporal sequences merged together to form a yin and yang diagram. Then, the positive and negative temporal sequences collided and exploded. Her attack shocked everyone. She wasn't an ultimate entity, but this earth-shattering attack blocked the Yuan race's rotten great universe entity. In the distance, Chu Feng's hair stood on end. He felt a sense of danger and glanced over to see that Yao Yao had actually helped him block the attack. It was the Yuan race again. They were like ghosts that wouldn't go away and had harmed him time and time again. At the same time, he couldn't help but curse the dog in his heart. It was too unreliable. He also wanted to curse that old son of his for being so unscrupulous. Dog, my son. Chu Feng's hair stood on end. He couldn't help but visualize the forms of the two entities and curse their mothers. In the outer realm, the two entities were dumbfounded. They didn't react to someone cursing them. Moments later, they still hadn't come back to their senses because they were also staring at the depths of reincarnation. They could feel the supreme aura of that peerless being's energy. Under such circumstances, they didn't pay attention to Chu Feng. They were studying the mysteries in the depths of reincarnation. Is this the reincarnation path that person dug out from the netherworld back then? Why do I feel like he left something behind? His own reincarnation won't take root here, will it? There's a saying in this world that person might enter reincarnation with his own body. He wants to deduce something and enter a certain place to kill the enemy. He can't be here, right? The man and the dog were stunned. They were a bit stupefied. There were 9 coffins there, and one of them was that person's son. 9 Dowie had run inside, and now even this man and dog knew about it. How could they not think about it? That person's backyard? At this moment, the short old man who had recovered from the famed mountains muttered to himself. His pupils contracted as though he had sensed something, and he sucked in a breath of cold air. Not many people in the two-realm battlefield heard what they said. Now, everyone's gazes were focused on Yao Yao and that rotten cosmos-level expert. The former had blocked one of the 2 Yuan immortals just like that. This was simply too shocking and shocking. Obviously, Yao Yao's attack wasn't normal. She was resisting with all her might. Even so, killing an immortal this time was enough to shock the world. At this moment, the yellow-toothed old man stepped forward and blocked in front. On the path of reincarnation, Chu Feng unleashed a massacre. His entire body was covered in blood. He had killed everyone just now, and even that golden-haired woman was slaughtered by him. A beautiful head flew out from the front of the snow-white longsword, and even her soul light was annihilated along with it. His heart was in turmoil. He was anxious and apprehensive. He saw Yao Yao attack, and also saw that rotten cosmos-level entity. Chu Feng knew that one of the 2 Yuan immortals was Yao Yao's great enemy. This Yuan expert, who had attained enlightenment in recent times and became a rotten cosmos-level expert, was the one who had killed Yao Yao's ancestor. Back then, he had planted the mother gold in Yao Yao's grandfather's body. Celestial Venerable Yushang's whole life of sorrow was caused by this person. Now, this rotten cosmos-level entity had come. He still didn't know that this stunning woman who dared to kill immortals was Yushang's descendant. Otherwise, he would have gone all out to kill her. That person, did he act out everything here? I can feel his sorrow and happiness. He came here. Is he still here? 9 Dowie murmured in the depths of reincarnation. At the same time, there was a cold glint in his eyes as he stared at the stronger hunter in the depths of the path of reincarnation. Who are you? Why are you entrenched here? How dare you touch such boundless karma? Very soon, he also noticed the outside world. 2 cold beams shot out from his eyes as he said, Yuan tribe, you've stretched your hands too far. Then, he shouted, don't you know that Chu Feng is a disciple in name of the first mountain? It's fine if the younger generation fights, but I don't want to waste the opportunity. Which old bastard is tired of living? Try attacking again. I'll chop off your dog claws. Woof. In the outer realm, the dog emperor couldn't help but growl and bare his teeth. That person's backyard, is it really here? At this moment, the short old man who had just recovered was about to enter the depths of the path of reincarnation. Chapter 1554. Jiu Dao had entered a long time ago, and now, even the short elder who revived from the famed mountains was horrified. He was even testing the danger with his own body, wishing to enter the depths of the reincarnation path. How could others not think too much? An uproar erupted. Then everyone's backs became cold and gloomy. They had a premonition that a great storm was likely going to happen today. It was related to that person, definitely not a small matter. That person's backyard. It was just a few words, but it was enough to shake the endless blue skies. With a so sound, the creator of the scripture of time, that short elder, disappeared, entering the depths of the reincarnation path. If it was anyone else, they wouldn't even be able to avoid it. Who would dare test the law with their own bodies and enter the reincarnation path? However, a creature like the short elder was definitely not an issue. He crossed the land of disaster with his flesh, daring to enter the land of rebirth alone. Some fallen true immortals speculated that if they used their world's level to measure things, the short elder was most likely a pseudo-fallen immortal king-level creature. Perhaps if the word pseudo was removed, he would be a true fallen immortal king-level creature. This was a bit shocking. Evolvers of this level were unstoppable, their power heaven overflowing, difficult to find their match in the entire world. Are the 9 coffins all the people from back then? The ones who dominated the past and present, the ones who once shook the wind and clouds? Are they those unmatched heroic spirits who followed that person through history? Jiudao's body trembled. Even someone as powerful as him found it a bit difficult to stand steadily. He could only confirm the one in the great vermilion coffin was that person's son. He walked over, entering an indistinct place. That was the depths of the reincarnation path. He was exploring, offering sacrifices, full of emotions. The others were all paying attention, but they couldn't see it, nor did they dare personally come. After all, that was the land of reincarnation. There were too many secrets. Could it be that that person really was inside, resting here, and was he still here? Outside, on the two-realm battlefield, the 2 Yuan clan immortals' expressions were cold to the extreme. Just now, they had been berated by Jiudao. Now, there was endless killing intent in the depths of their eyes. Even though they had heard of the Battle of Soul River, they still hadn't personally seen it, so they couldn't see through the truth. That was why their reverence towards Jiudao was only on the surface. Their hearts hadn't reached the level of incomparable fear, so they didn't know his depths at all. Moreover, their current standpoint was completely different. They didn't place their hopes on the Yang realm, and they didn't even place their hopes on the heavens. They had already pledged allegiance to the outside world many years ago, especially now that 9 Daos had entered the depths of reincarnation to investigate the mystery of that person's life and death. Their eyes were cold as they locked onto Chu Feng again. This was because the 2 Yuan clan immortals had a feeling that there was a big problem with this youth. If they didn't kill him now, they might not be able to kill him in the future. They even had a terrifying premonition that this young man named Chu would be a great calamity in the future. He would bring a calamity to the Yuan family. When he realized this, the rotten great universe-level Yuan race expert couldn't help but want to attack again. He wanted to kill him as soon as possible. Regardless of whether he was a crisis or a disaster with boundless potential, if he got rid of him now, it would be the end of all troubles. He wouldn't have to worry about the future. Therefore, this cosmos realm being, who had once caused the death of Yao Yao's ancestor and caused heavenly venerable Yushang to live a miserable life, didn't hesitate to offend the first mountain to make a move. Meanwhile, the other Yuan race immortal, an ultimate entity whose age couldn't be determined, immediately cooperated and secretly prepared to block the yellow-toothed old man next to Yao Yao. Suddenly, the 2 Yuan race immortals launched a thunderous attack to kill Chu Feng. The yellow-toothed old man and Yao Yao were the first to come to their senses and quickly tried to stop them. The yellow-toothed old man had the power of a true immortal. In the blink of an eye, he clashed with the Yuan race's ultimate expert. Blazing light erupted between the two as if heaven and earth were being split apart. 2 great suns rose up, smelting the void and turning all things into nothingness. Their exchange was too terrifying. The laws of the world were broken like firewood burning. The energy of the absolute beginning filled the air, and the aura of the universe's destruction enveloped the area. Meanwhile, the other Yuan race immortal, the cosmos realm being, had already raised his hand and grabbed toward the reincarnation path. He pulled Chu Feng over through the air. At his level, it was all too easy for him to kill beings below the ultimate level. Even if the Heng generation came, he could kill them with a single hand. As for the degeneration, he could poke them to death with one finger. In terms of realm, Chu Feng still couldn't be considered a true powerhouse. He still hadn't fully stepped into the next realm. Thus, if he were to be hit by this person, his body and soul would be pulverized in an instant. Not even a bloody pulp would remain. "You dare?" some people shouted, but it was too late to stop him. An entity with the power of a true immortal was too fast. How many people could stop it? It could even be said that how many people could see it clearly? Many people could only judge based on their intuition. In the blink of an eye, the world had been pierced by the laws of the world. A large hand had opened the reincarnation path and was about to kill Chu Feng. Li Dahe, you're such a scammer. The old man's eyes were wide open. Although he couldn't see clearly, he knew that Chu Feng was done for. And this time, Li Su wasn't nearby. Everyone understood that Chu Feng would die without a doubt if a true immortal entity attacked. He simply couldn't stop it. And this rotten cosmos realm being from the Yuan race definitely had such power. He was one of the few people in the Yang realm who had achieved the Tao in recent times. He might even be the only one. At the very least, that was the case on the surface. Thus, this rotten cosmos realm being from the Yuan race had always been a man of his word. His talents were too high, and he was extremely powerful. He dared to command the evolvers of all races since ancient times. Chu Feng's body flew up and was pulled out of the reincarnation path. He flew directly toward that terrifying black hand. That hand looked very crude, but every single one of its patterns was a law, a Tao pattern. As such, capturing existences below the ultimate realm was far too easy. Space was collapsing around the hand, and time itself was unstable. Fragments of time danced in the air. It was a terrifying scene. The rumors were true. The Yuan race also had an incomplete time art. All of this happened in the time it took for a spark to fly off a flint. It was so fast that no one could react. Contrary to everyone's expectations, Chu Feng didn't panic in the slightest when he was pulled into the air. Instead, he wielded his snow-white sword and slashed at the hand. Was he crazy? What was the use? Even if he was powerful enough to stand shoulder to shoulder with a great primordial entity, how could he resist a true immortal evolver? Chu Feng's hair flew in the wind. His eyes were cold and unmoved by the outside world. There was only the hand in his eyes, and in his heart, there was only his sword intent. He advanced courageously and resolutely brandished his sword. In the blink of an eye, it was as though the Milky Way had fallen and the sea of stars had exploded. A vast expanse of whiteness enshrouded the area with countless mysterious runes. It was peerless and peerless as if it could sever the universe. At this time, Yao Yao also moved at the same time. She attacked the cosmos realm entity from behind with resplendent immortal light as she thrust her sword straight at the Yuan race expert's back. This powerful character from the Yuan race, who had achieved the Tao in recent times, had a callous expression on his face. He was unmoved and flipped his palm to slap Chu Feng to death. What sword light! What technique! They were nothing in his eyes because the realm gap was too great. In his heavenly eyes, this was no more than a moth trying to shake a giant dragon. The person who attacked him was bound to be smashed to pieces. However, the next moment, his callous expression froze. His entire body froze in midair and didn't move an inch. Even the runes on the hand he had used to grab Chu Feng had disappeared and become dim and lightless. Do you really not take my words seriously? Do you dare personally come and kill a disciple in name from the first mountain? This was Jiuyi's voice. It came from the depths of the reincarnation road. Even though his true body had entered, he hadn't forgotten about the outside world and was still paying attention. The Yuan race's cosmos realm entity could be considered the most powerful voice in recent times, but now he was horrified. He couldn't move at all and was frozen in midair. This was the first time he realized that the waters of the Yang realm were too deep. How could there be a living monster with power far surpassing that of a true immortal? At this time, Chu Feng's sword arrived. He had always been cold and unperturbed. His calmness was astonishing. Now, wherever the snow-white sword pointed, it immediately chopped down. That large hand was actually cut off. Blood splattered everywhere. This was the true blood of a cosmos realm entity. A terrifying aura pervaded the air, and many evolvers couldn't bear it. They almost went limp on the ground. The pressure from the blood was too powerful. Everyone was shaken and couldn't believe their eyes. What had they just seen? A youth had cut off a cosmos realm entity's hand? The hand had been severed at the wrist and immortal blood gushed out. This was too unreal. Normally speaking, even if a rotting cosmos realm entity stood there and let Chu Feng hack at it 1,000 times, its true body wouldn't break. In fact, if the true blood of a cosmos realm entity splashed out, it would be enough to intimidate Chu Feng. He wouldn't be able to bear it. Otherwise, how could a near-immortal existence be aloof and overlook the world of the Yang realm? Now, this blade was simply subversive. It broke common sense and was simply unbelievable. How could it be like this? It was all because this blade was too special. It was formed from an unfathomable seed and had absorbed mutant soil from the Yang realm. There was a plateau in the Yang realm where a bronze coffin related to that person and the celestial emperor had been buried. Even Chu Feng himself hadn't expected the silvery white blade to be so powerful after erupting. It was inconceivably sharp and cut off the true immortal's wrist, causing it to fall to the ground. Of course, he wasn't afraid during this process. After all, Nine Dowie was on the reincarnation road. In addition, he had just been cursing the dog for a long time and constantly visualizing his old son. He had long since provoked the man and the dog and was waiting for them to grace him with their presence. Thus, even during the process of being detained, he was unruffled and resolutely brandished his blade. But now it seemed that Nine Dowie was still the most reliable. That man and dog had stood him up again. They deserved to be struck by lightning. He couldn't help but curse the dog in his heart again. Dog, old son. At the same time, Yao Yao's sword pierced through the great cosmos expert's heart from the back. Immortal blood sprayed everywhere, and the scene was incomparably terrifying. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air and trembled. This was simply the first time since the creation of the world. A great cosmos expert's body had been repeatedly destroyed by someone of a lower realm. It was too inconceivable. Everyone's gazes toward Chu Feng and Yao Yao had changed. Everything happened in an instant. From the Yuan race's great cosmos expert's attack to being frozen in place, his blood-stained right hand falling to the ground, and his heart being pierced through, it all happened in an instant. Nine Dowie's cold voice traveled over. I don't care if anyone below the great cosmos attacks, chases, or kills a disciple in name from the first mountain. But you, a near-immortal monster, are also so shameless. Don't blame me for being impolite. Many people trembled, feeling a wave of incomparable power. However, the corner of Li Su's mouth twitched as he recalled some of the bad experiences he had in the past. Someone below the true immortal realm could casually chase down a disciple from the first mountain? What a gloomy life! He had experienced the same thing back then. In reality, many people had thought of this problem. The first mountain's standards for accepting disciples had always been frighteningly high, but how many were left in the end? Throughout history, almost all of the first mountain's disciples had disappeared. Even Li Su was rumored to have died for eons before returning to the world of the living. It was clear how miserable the first mountain's disciples were. Although it was said that the strong survived and the weak were eliminated, the chances of them being killed by the outside world were too high. It could be considered a hellish growth process. You've crossed the line, Nine Dowie shouted. Then, people saw a crack appear between the Yuan race's great cosmos expert's brows. Blood flowed out, and the crack quickly spread downward. He was about to be split in two. Fuck! Everyone was shocked. Was the old man's skin from the first mountain this powerful? It seemed that some of the rumors and shouts of the Battle of the Soul River weren't just rumors. It was truly too terrifying. The moment the Nine Daos were enraged, they were able to tear apart the Yuan race near immortal expert in midair. Noiselessly, a black shadow appeared in the two-realm battlefield. He was like a specter that swallowed up the sunlight. The light couldn't fully illuminate his appearance. He sighed like a vengeful ghost that had lived for eons. His voice was old and sinister, giving people the feeling that they were about to fall into the abyss and into hell. Fellow Taoist, please show mercy. Who hasn't made mistakes before? I guarantee that no true immortal evolver will recklessly attack any of the First Mountain's disciples. Everyone was shaken. Who was this? Where did he come from? He seemed to be on par with Nine Taoist. Moreover, was there a hidden meaning in his words? Could it be that there were other disciples from the First Mountain fighting elsewhere? Was this half negotiation and half coercion? Nine Taoist let out a cold snort. Then, the Yuan race's great cosmos expert was sent flying. His body had been split in half, and true blood flowed out. Of course, at the Yuan race's great cosmos expert's level, he couldn't die. As long as his soul light wasn't extinguished, everything would reappear. Moreover, his physical body was still there. Clearly, Nine Taoist didn't want to shed all pretense of cordiality. Everyone realized that the person who had come was an extraordinary existence. At the scene, the fallen true immortals were greatly shaken. They guessed inwardly that this shouldn't be the fallen immortal king who had walked to the extreme, completely forsaking the light and falling into eternal darkness, right? That person, is he really here? I don't know if he's alive or dead, or if he has already used this place to leap into the sky and fight again. But no matter what, I have to come here to pay my respects to the supreme God who ruled over eons. The ghost-like shadow spoke. He had also entered the depths of the reincarnation road. Waves of special fluctuations were transmitted from the land of reincarnation. It was as if there were people colliding, but also as if experts were communicating. The runes turned into a stream of particles. It was extremely terrifying. Not long after, everything seemed to return to equilibrium. I can feel your power. I was once a small soldier, but now I'm also old. Will I be able to see you again? On the reincarnation road, Nine Taoist was trembling, and even his lips were trembling. Heavens! Outside, after the old monsters heard these words, their bodies directly broke out in cold sweat. They were inwardly shaken. Wasn't Nine Taoist's status too high? He had actually met that person before? From his words, he had lived in the same era as that person. Although there had long been rumors in the world, they had never been confirmed. Now that Nine Taoist himself had spoken like this, it truly frightened many people. I have come to have an audience to pay my respects to you. Nine Taoist was incomparably devout. He entered the depths of the reincarnation road and entered an extremely strange region. There was a hazy light covering this place, and there was a faint flow of emotions. At this time, the short elder who had revived from the famed mountains and the black spectre-like expert who had just arrived were both horrified. They also approached that place, and their hair stood on end. This is... Suddenly, Nine Taoist trembled. His body was like a sieve, as if he had experienced an incomparably terrifying event. In a split second, his face became pale as if he had seen through some kind of truth. He muttered, "We're all dead. The entire world is gone. Is the entire world fake? The endless heavens, the entire ancient history, it's all just a dream." Chapter 1555. A faint light came from the depths of the reincarnation road. It was like a golden sea that had been sprinkled with the morning glow, sparkling and rippling as it baptized the world. The eternal heavens are a painting. Neither you nor I are real. We're all illusions. It's just a dream. Now we've woken up from the dream. Nine Taoist's voice traveled over. It was filled with sadness and a sense of helplessness as he yearned for this world. His words were too penetrative, sending chills down people's spines. Awakening from the dream. It was like a curse that bloomed here and swept through the void. It was like the evening drum and morning bell that touched people's souls and disturbed everyone's dreams. For a moment, many evolvers were shaken, and then they seemed to have come to a realization. Chu Feng was enlightened. He suddenly felt that he had been confined to a deep sleep for a long time, and now he was finally waking up. Dong! It was as if a great bell was ringing in his ears, causing light to gradually appear before his eyes. Soon, a layer of window paper would be pierced through, and he would see the outside world. "You're awake." A call came to his ears, and the smell of disinfectant was not very pleasant. Chu Feng gradually opened his eyes. It was a bit hazy, and he could vaguely see that the walls were very white. Where was this? "Chu Feng, you've finally woken up. Thank the heavens!" someone exclaimed in joy. "Traveling alone and daring to climb Mount Kunlun alone, you're too bold. This time, you accidentally rolled down a slope. It was quite dangerous," someone beside him said. Chu Feng was at a loss. Where was this? Was he in the hospital? There were a few familiar faces in front of him. Yi Xian was a very quiet university classmate who often played football with him. He was looking at him nervously. There was also Su Lingxi, a beautiful classmate who had left a deep impression on him. She was very beautiful and could be said to be slightly handsome. She usually did everything neatly and easily. "Chu Feng, don't take things too hard. This isn't in line with your personality. You only broke up peacefully. It can't be considered a painful breakup. If something were to happen to you this time, people would really think that you couldn't get over it and jumped off the mountain. Who knows, it might even be on the news very soon." During graduation season, a young man surnamed Chu jumped off the Kunlun mountain after falling out of love. How explosive would that be? Everyone else jumped off the building, but you jumped off the ancestor of the myriad mountains, the source of the dragon vein. Would you be spreading the name of Kunlun or tarnishing its reputation? Su Lingxi smiled sweetly and deliberately put on a carefree look, not leaving any face for Chu Feng. Chu Feng was in a daze. He couldn't wrap his head around it. This was Earth, and he was in a hospital? Moreover, he had just separated from Linoi not long after graduation? Yi Xian said, "The doctor said that your head injury isn't serious, so there won't be any sequelae. However, your parents are worried sick. Uncle and auntie are exhausted and have taken care of you for an entire day and night. We just persuaded them to take a nap." Chu Feng felt a little pain in his temples. After calming down a little, he looked at the people in front of him. Their faces were still the same as when they had just graduated. Why did he always feel like many years had passed? However, they didn't seem to have grown any more mature. They were still so familiar and intimate. Then, in an instant, Chu Feng was completely stunned. He was in the hospital. He fell from the Kunlun mountain and was in a coma until now? Like a bolt of lightning, countless images appeared in his mind. Then, he quickly circulated his breathing technique. However, he couldn't feel it without power. Was everything different from what he had imagined? The so-called evolution, the so-called little Yin realm and the Yang realm, all kinds of strange and dazzling things, all the holy monsters, all those were fake, all a dream? He couldn't come back to his senses. Why was it so real? In his dream, many years ago, his evolution. Yes, excess was in Kunlun, and it was also at that time that the changes in the world began. Now, all of this was just a dream, a magnificent and bloody story. It was all an illusion. Was that someone else's sorrow and joy? The real situation was that he had an accident in Kunlun and was in a coma. Now, out of instinct and self-preservation, at the critical moment in the dream, some terrifying experience and stimulation had awakened him from his vegetative state? Chu Feng's face was pale. There was regret and reluctance. In his dream, he had so many friends, so many stories, so many joys and sorrows. He couldn't let it go, couldn't bear to. After a long time, he looked at the people in front of him. "It's been a long time. I miss you all," Chu Feng said emotionally. It had been many years since they last met. In his dream, it seemed that more than 10 years had passed. In particular, in his dream, he had embarked on the path of evolution and became a very famous human trafficker. It was impossible not to be noticed. It could be said that he was famous under the starry sky. In order not to implicate more people, he tried his best to stay away. In the end, he even entered the Yang realm. It had been many years since they last met, and now that they met again, it was very cordial. Why are you acting so strange? We met again so soon after graduation. You're not old yet, but you're already living in your memories? Yi Xian joked. Everything was over after he woke up from the dream. Chu Feng sighed. Why did he feel so reluctant to part with that strange and dazzling world? Zhuangzhou dreams of the butterfly dreams of Zhuangzhou. I see, I smell, see me, smell me. How do I choose? Chu Feng said softly. Then, he used all his strength to use his consciousness and all the strength in his body to let out a low roar. I choose. This is a dream, the foreign realm is not an illusion. Then, his body blossomed with radiance, and white mist flowed in and out of his mouth and nose. He had successfully circulated his breathing technique. He lightly tapped forward with his hand, and those friends and classmates of his shattered and vanished like an illusion. I wish you all well, Chu Feng shouted as he struggled to break free from the light screen. Then, he recovered and returned. He once again stood in front of the two realms battlefield. He was somewhat disappointed. He had left Earth for a long time and indeed wanted to go back and take a look. The scene in front of him was strange and even terrifying. Waves of light rippled out from the road of reincarnation. They were divine and vast and covered the entire two realms battlefield. Everyone was lost in thought and in a daze. Chu Feng had completely recovered. The experience just now could only make him a little absent-minded and confused for a short while, because he had already experienced something similar before. But now, he could see that some people were indeed fading away and about to disappear. This is... Chu Feng drew in a breath of cold air and felt his hair stand on end. Boom! A thunderous roar exploded in his ears. At the same time, his eyes were filled with incomparable pain and almost blood. Could he not examine this forbidden scene? In the depths of the road of reincarnation, Nine Daos was in a miserable state. He said in a deranged manner, "The eternal sky is a painting. We are all fake, all people in the painting, all imprints of history, all deaths recorded by time." Like a clap of thunder or a heavenly tribulation, his words were too terrifying and deafening. In the blink of an eye, many people were awakened. Soon, everyone recovered from the strange state and the place was in an uproar. Chu Feng could not see, and his eyes were throbbing with pain. It was the same for many people. They could see the hazy figures around them, but they could not see them clearly. The old ghost who studied time and left behind the decaying scroll, "You are indeed dead." Nine Daos' voice came from the depths of the road of reincarnation and looked at the short elder who had forcefully taken in the martial madman as a Tao child. The short elder was in a trance. Now that he had recovered, he rebuked, "What nonsense are you talking about? I have comprehended the mysteries of the runes of time, and have long since become immortal and eternal. See, this is the real world." Nine Daos pointed at him, and the light was clear and crystalline. Like a baptism of water, it drowned the elder. "See, your face is covered in blood. Who knows how long you have been dead? What you feel and what you are experiencing now, it is all fake. Nonsense." The short elder's eyes blossomed with runes of time. His aura rose sharply, and his energy level rose by a large margin. "The scroll you left behind back then has already decayed. Did you not think too much about it? You died yourself, and what you left behind was only a will. That was your final experience and comprehension." Nine Daos sighed. "They are all dead, and their faces are covered in blood. Most of their vitality no longer exists." Nine Daos sighed with boundless sorrow. Had he seen the truth of the world? "Tao friend, you have gone mad. The mountains and rivers are still the same. Even though life is impermanent, it is still operating." Not far away, the ghost-like shadow spoke. He was suspected to have come from the fallen immortal world. Moreover, Some true immortals suspected that he might be one of the legendary creatures of the fallen immortal royal race who had reached the end of their path. Moreover, some true immortals believed that he was one of the most powerful fallen experts who had fallen into eternal darkness and would never look back. What are we? Nine Das looked towards the depths of the reincarnation road, and then towards the vast outside world. What are we? We are like people in a painting, splashed with ink, leaving behind a shadow imprint. In the distance, Chu Feng was shaken. What did he hear? Nine Das was actually talking in his sleep like he had gone mad, as if he had suffered a great blow. Moreover, he still hadn't finished speaking and was still roaring. According to Nine Das, the endless sky was nothing more than a painting. The scenery of mountains and rivers, as well as all of the creatures inside, were all painted. This was too horrifying and frightening. You really have gone mad. Look carefully at this world, it is so vivid. The creator of the scripture of time, the short elder who had revived from the famed mountains, said in a low voice. He was scared, but even more so, he was unwilling to accept this. He was one step closer to understanding the truth of the reincarnation road's depth. Perhaps this is an exaggeration, but this kind of analogy is not too far off. I am now starting to understand why that person is not in the ancient history, and will not appear in the future. Nine Das was extremely depressed. You and I are both dead, and the entire world has declined. Perhaps we were all visualized by that person. This was like a bolt from the blue, exploding everyone's ears. This was too terrifying and shocking. The evolvers of the two-realm battlefield felt a chill from head to toe, and their hair stood on end. Chu Feng's scalp went numb, and then even his brain went numb. He felt a chill, and then he felt as if he had been electrocuted. This was too shocking, unimaginable, and shook one's soul. He thought of many things. The earth was reincarnating, and some old things were repeating themselves. He was born on Earth, so what did all of this foretell? He didn't completely believe Nine Das' words, but he also accepted a part of the suspicious truth. We of the past have all died, and only a few traces remain, not even imprints. Could it be that person is using his true body to perform reincarnation to reverse everything, and we are only the people in the painting he visualized along the way? At this time, Nine Das was mumbling to himself, continuously guessing. One thing Nine Das could be sure of was that he had truly died. He was a small soldier from back then, and perhaps he had already died in battle many eras ago. But what about that person? After his true body entered reincarnation, he had yet to return. Perhaps he had met with an accident and dissipated, or perhaps he had transcended once again and left. At this time, millions and millions of miles away, in an indescribable void beyond the Yang realm, the Dog Emperor and the decayed corpse's expressions were wooden. They looked at each other in dismay, feeling waves of fear. They gazed at Nine Das together, feeling a chill run down their spines. Woof, this old man has gone mad. Perhaps he's dead, but how can he say that all the worlds are dead? At least I'm still alive. The black dog bared its teeth. Dog at death's door. The decayed corpse glanced at it, and then used a great divine ability to whisper into Nine Das' ear in the depths of the reincarnation road. He wanted to understand the situation. Dog and the dead Fatso, the Taoist priest, you are all people in the painting. You were all visualized by others, and if you really existed, you've been dead for a long time, Nine Das replied. Bullsh *T. Immortal Chi. The Dog Emperor was furious, but it didn't forget to change its words. How could it accept the fact that it was dead? You and I are both colors in the painting that were splashed by others. Nine Das shook its head. Release, my immortal Chi. This is a void realm. Nothing is real. The entire history is like this. Nine Das looked up to the sky and sighed. Nonsense. Based on what you've said, could it be that the three heavenly emperors of history, the supreme existences, were also fake? Were they also visualized like you and me? The Dog Emperor asked viciously. Perhaps, I don't know. Nine Daos sighed deeply. Finally, he looked at the two-realm battlefield, at the shadows of evolved beings. Some of their faces were covered in thick blood, and they looked gloomy. In the distance, the blood moon hung in the sky, and the sky and earth hung upside down. Nine Daos was extremely depressed. Hell is empty, and evil spirits are in the world. Chapter 1556. They're all evil spirits, their faces covered in blood, wandering outside. Jiu Daoi's voice was very fleeting, as if it came from far away, but in the ears of many, it was like a clap of thunder. Chu Feng's body stiffened. At this moment, he couldn't help but think of a past event. It was a special night when he met a man who mocked himself as coming out from hell to take a stroll. That man was very handsome and had a unique temperament. He looked otherworldly, and when he sighed with sorrow and frustration, he said that he had once reigned supreme in the world of heaven and earth. At that time, this man had said that there were dead people everywhere in the world of the living that night. They were wandering with their faces covered in blood, and now, Jiu Dao was exactly like what he had said. Did the old man also notice something? He actually said something like that. If what he said was true, how could people not collapse? The whole world was fake, and they were all people in the painting, all dead. Now, it was natural to understand why Jiu Dao had suddenly gone crazy. His worldview had collapsed, and everything he knew had been overturned. Even he himself had been denied. Who could face this calmly? Jiu Dao stretched out his hands and stood on the reincarnation path. Facing the shimmering golden halo, he suddenly moved forward, as if he wanted to walk to the end of this eternal painting. Everything is fake. I gradually understand why I can't find that person. All of us are attached to his dream, so he doesn't exist in the whole of history. Jiu Daoi's dream was more and more confused, and there was endless sadness. In the past, the deepest memories of those people were all death. In reality, they had all died a long time ago. They had all died tens of thousands of years ago. Even he himself was the same. Was everything that had happened now just attached to that person's memories? The world no longer exists, the heavens have long perished, nothing is real. Jiu Daoi's voice was trembling. His body was hunched, and he seemed much older. He slowly walked forward with unsteady step. He stretched out his hand to touch the golden ripples in the depths of reincarnation. In the end, he cried out involuntarily, "Perhaps the whole world is that person, and we are all weak traces attached to his body." Now, the two-realm battlefield could no longer be calm. Everyone was in a state of panic, and there was a clamor. Especially after hearing Jiu Daoi's words, people became more and more afraid, and they felt more and more alarmed. They had all been denied. They weren't even real living beings. Old Skin, you've really gone mad. Perhaps you've already died a long time ago, but look at this emperor, I've always had my true body. At this time, a loud shout broke the original fear. Beyond the Yang realm, in the boundless void, a large black dog's paw stretched down from the heavens. It was majestic and intimidating, and it didn't stop after entering the Yang realm. Instead, it rapidly entered the golden light in the depths of the reincarnation road. Then, a wretched scream rang out. It was quite horrifying and made people feel incomparable fear. It was extremely terrifying and caused all the evolvers to feel a chill run down their spines. It was because those dog cries were too miserable, extremely horrifying. "Why?" the Dog Emperor howled. Its scalp tingled with numbness as it witnessed the true appearance of the giant claw it had used to approach the mortal realm and probe into the depths of the path of reincarnation. It was actually rotten, jet black, stinky and tainted with filthy blood. That scene caused its mouth to tremble uncontrollably, and its incomplete canine teeth to chatter. Am I dead? I was originally an emperor body, immortal and indestructible, but now all my fur has fallen off, and my flesh is almost rotten through? Dead? The Dog Emperor's big black dog paw didn't look like a living thing at all. In the sparkling golden light, it reflected the boundless aura of death. It had long been rotten. Was this the truth? Was it long dead and no longer in this world? I can't believe that you actually went and became a dead dog. It's so sad, so sad. The decayed corpse sighed. In the void outside the Yang realm, it sat on the bronze coffin and patted the Dog Emperor's head. After a long time, the black dog came back to its senses. Then, it flew into a rage out of humiliation and said, "Scram, you're the one who's dead." Then, it slapped the decayed corpse with its paw, wanting to slap it into the Yang realm and into the path of reincarnation. It also wanted to see its current state and the truth. The decayed corpse blocked it, but in the end it couldn't help but stretch out an arm of its own accord. Trembled and reached into the Yang realm, straight into the path of reincarnation. In an instant, it was as if it had been stung by the most venomous insect from beyond the 33 heavens. Its arm trembled violently, and it quickly retracted. Because in that instant it saw the rotten arm, and there were even disaster-level maggots moving in and out of it. Was this complete rot and death? Although it looked like a decayed corpse now, it still had vitality. However, once it reached into the golden light in the depths of the path of reincarnation, the truth that was reflected was 100 times more serious, and it had long since lost its vitality. We're all dead? How is this possible? I'm clearly still alive. The decayed corpse muttered. It looked at the arm in front of it, a little dazed. Everyone was dead. They were all visualized. The entire world, the endless universe, and the void were all just a painting? The Dog Emperor said, "That's impossible. The 3 Sky Emperors are extremely powerful, and they've long since climbed to the peak. They're extremely powerful. How could they be visualized?" The decayed corpse quickly nodded, as if finding a reason for itself to live. "That's right. If the world is illusory, then my body is still here. Even if it's in a rotten state in the depths of the path of reincarnation, it still proves that it's not an illusion. Perhaps it's just that old man's skin and the other monsters that were visualized." In the depths of the path of reincarnation, 9 Daos turned around and looked beyond the world. "It's not just you. There are many others who have rotting corpses, and their faces are covered in blood. But they're all just attached to that person's energy, and in the end they're all dead. You old man's skin, why do you insist that we're all dead?" The Dog Emperor was furious. He couldn't accept this no matter what. "I've only uncovered the bloody reality, and revealed the nature and truth of this world." 9 Daos sighed. Even the creator of the scripture of time, the short old man, was lost in thought, and didn't speak for a long time. He had revived from the famed mountains. Could it be that he was actually just a corpse's obsession and final reflection? There was also the black shadow that seemed to be a fallen immortal king. He was also silent as he stared at the depths of the path of reincarnation. He was deducing and guessing, and his heart was incomparably conflicted. 9 Daos murmured, "Perhaps that person hasn't transcended ancient history, and has never left. Because this piece of ancient history is him, and the history he resided in has already been destroyed. His sorrow, his longing, his grief, and the death of all ages have formed us." My heavens! Everyone felt as if their scalps were about to split open, and they were in extreme pain. Then, they felt as if they'd been electrocuted. Their bodies were ice cold, and it was incomparably uncomfortable. How could one deduce things like that? Suddenly, the Dog Emperor's eyes became sharp, and they became more and more resplendent. He said, "You're possessed. Come and see if this person is actually a living thing." Then, with a wave of his paw, he slapped Chu Feng into the depths of the path of reincarnation, and he was reflected in the vast and holy golden light. "I'm still me." Chu Feng stretched out his hand. He saw his own body of flesh and blood. It was full of vitality, and he wasn't an inanimate object. At this moment, Long Diu, who was watching the liveliness from the side, was also gripped by the neck by a furry dog paw. He was so frightened that he let out a blood-curdling howl. In the end, he was rapidly thrown into the depths of the path of reincarnation. In a split second, his body became misty and transformed several times. He was a real body of flesh and blood. Not only did he materialize, but he was also real. Moreover, it seemed as if there was some kind of mysterious energy in the depths of the path of reincarnation that traced back to his past life. In the very beginning, he was actually a golden silkworm in a certain life a long time ago. After that, he became a strange dragon in a certain life. During this process, he swallowed the 33-layered heaven's grass, which was enough for him to live for 3 lifetimes. Ah, I'm also Ouyang Feng, the strange dragon cried out. Then, he was thrown out of the path of reincarnation. He stumbled and fell beside old Gu, completely absent-minded. When he was a dragon, he swallowed the 33-layered heaven's grass. During a certain period of time, his corporeal body became drowsy and deathly still for a long time. This wasn't as simple as living for 3 lifetimes. The 33-layered heaven's grass was too astonishing and mysterious. At that time, not only did it allow him to undergo nirvana, but it also allowed half of his spiritual consciousness to reincarnate. In the end, he arrived on Earth and became the divine beast toad, Ouyang Feng. As it turned out, he had long known Chu Feng. He had once coexisted with that human trafficker in the lesser netherworld and caused a great commotion. He had done one big job after another. It was only when the great martial deity descended and killed them that they were sent into the path of reincarnation by Chu Feng. Only then did that part of Ouyang Feng's spiritual consciousness return to the strange dragon's corporeal body. It could be considered a different kind of reincarnation, returning to the world of the living. However, he didn't awaken his memories from the lesser netherworld on Earth after he returned. It was only now that he truly recovered. In the distance, Chu Feng was also astonished. The strange dragon was actually Ouyang Feng? No wonder he had always felt that his temperament was unique and seemed familiar. He was too similar to that old friend. Long Yu was also muttering, "No wonder I felt that Sister Yao Yao looked familiar when she was fighting with someone. I'm also a member of the heroic spirits on Earth." Ouyang Feng was deeply moved and indescribably shocked. After that, the way he looked at Chu Feng changed and became rather unkind. He had been tormented and bullied by this human trafficker in 2 lifetimes. He was constantly made a scapegoat and was truly miserable. Old Gu was bewildered. He couldn't help but touch the strange dragon's shoulder when he saw how crazy he was and asked, "What's wrong with you?" "I achoo. Only today did I realize that I'm me. My true self has returned," Ouyang Feng replied. At the same time, his saliva splattered in all directions. In just a split second, old Gu had practically become a drowned rat. His face completely darkened. What kind of freaking style is this? What kind of temperament is this? Is this how you talk? This is thunder and rain. He wanted to strangle the strange dragon, Ouyang Feng, alive. Ouyang Feng had just recovered his memories from Earth, so some of his habits surfaced. He couldn't help but spit wildly when he spoke. Bang! Old Gu wasn't polite. He slapped the back of the strange dragon's head and sent him flying several hundred meters away. He said, "I don't care if you're Long Yu or Ouyang Feng. Be quiet in front of me." At this moment, Chu Feng also fell out. Zhou Shi was also sent into the depths of the reincarnation path. In the end, what was reflected was still a real person. It was sparkling flesh and blood in the divine light, and not a malicious spirit dyed in blood. After that, Yao Yao took the initiative to enter. What was reflected was also a true body full of vitality. "Old skin, what do you think? Is what I said true? Perhaps you're dead, but this world isn't fake. There are a large number of living creatures," shouted the Dog Emperor. Nine Dowie was dumbfounded and his body stiffened. He felt that there were still some problems. Many people in this world were really corpses. They were all traces of the past. He suddenly raised his head and gazed at the outer realm. He replied to the Dog Emperor and said, "But you're indeed dead. You've long since rotted." It was as if someone had stepped on the Dog Emperor's tail, and also as if he was choked. He let out a low growl but couldn't say anything. The dog paw that was reflected just now made him feel a chill down his spine. Nine Dowie suddenly shouted, "Something's wrong. There must be some problem. Someone is hiding the truth and not letting me see the whole world. Who? Is it the power behind the reincarnation hunters? Which power do you belong to? You actually dare to make a move in that person's backyard? Do you want to die without a burial? Or could it be that you were originally related to that person? You're something he left behind, but now you've been used by outsiders to dominate this place?" After a long period of silence, the Dog Emperor opened his mouth. It was very low but very powerful. His voice lingered beside Nine Dowie's ears, and his low voice was intimidating. "You said that we're all dead, that we're all virtual bodies, that we're just people in the painting. But have you ever thought that perhaps the truth is the opposite?" The Dog Emperor's voice was full of demonic nature and a mysterious power. He continued, "Have you ever thought of an extremely terrifying possibility? In fact, that person never existed. He's the virtual one. There's never been such a person." What are you talking about?" Nine Dowie was furious. No matter what, he was filled with feelings for that person. His respect and reverence had reached an extreme point. The Dog Emperor's eyes were deep and his voice was low as he said, "Perhaps all of this is because our world, the heavens back then, suffered an irreversible calamity. Blood and chaos destroyed everything. We were powerless to resist, and no one could resist. That person was only the hope in all of our hearts, the longing of all the races. He was a completely imaginary person. We hoped that he would be able to flatten the world, quell the chaos of blood, destroy the ominous, kill all enemies, sweep through the endless heavens, overturn the past, rewrite the war, and rewrite the entire history." These words were like chaotic thunder and lightning, shaking the heavens and the earth. It was too shocking. The Dog Emperor said in a low voice, "In fact, there was never such a person." Chapter 1557. There had never been such a person? That person was only the embodiment of the people's dreams, the hope of all races, the last hope of those who were powerless against the great apocalypse. All living beings wanted such a person to appear, to rewrite history, to overturn the past, and to reform the universe. What kind of despair was this? How dark was the general trend? How desperate was the situation for all living beings to resonate like this? That person was only an expert in people's hearts, and he was the one they had visualized? Nine Daos was like a wooden statue, chilled from head to toe. His spirit felt as if it had fallen into the dark and cold underworld. The boundless chill pierced his bones and corroded his soul. "It's not like that." He shook his head, unable to accept such a guess. "Old man, most of the time, reality is cruel, and the truth is often bloody. We can't do anything about it, but we have to accept it." The Dog Emperor's heart was heavy. There has never been such a person. He looked at Chu Feng, Yao Yao, the strange dragon, Zhou Shi, and the others. This was the evidence, the reality. They had flesh and blood, and they were full of vitality. They weren't corpses or ghosts. If they were visualized, if they were in a painting, how could they be alive? Nine Daos was stunned. If what the dog said was true, then it would completely overturn his beliefs, and his entire worldview would collapse. But in that instant, Nine Daos looked up as if he had remembered something. His empty eyes shot out immortal light as he looked at the Dog Emperor. "That can't be. You've seen that person." At this point, his tone became more serious. "You've seen that person, but you don't remember him. This proves that you've died and lost your memories. What? I've seen that person and lived with him for a lifetime? The dog emperor was shocked. Even according to the legends, he was separated from that person by more than one epoch. Even the 3 heavenly emperors couldn't have lived with that person in the same lifetime, let alone him. At that time, you were still a puppy. You could be considered your previous life, and you've seen that person. Your next life has also looked at him from across time and space. Even though you could bite the heavens and the earth, biting the immortals until they didn't dare to release immortal chi, you never dared to act presumptuously in front of that person, let alone bite him. Nine Da said truthfully. What the hell? As if I'd believe a rotten old man like you. The dog emperor didn't believe him. This proves that you really are dead. All of your past is gone, gone with the wind and time. Nine Daoi shook his head. The dog emperor was scared. Today, it had been emphasized time and time again that it had died a long time ago. It truly made it feel uneasy, flustered, and a bit stifled. Its old eyes were cloudy as it looked at the rotten corpse beside it. It wanted to let its real body enter the reincarnation cycle completely. The decayed corpse ignored him, which meant, "Why don't you charge in yourself?" As soon as Nine Paths spoke, he went to the zombie and said, "You have forgotten the past, too. That means you are completely dead. You and I are now people in a painting. The river of history is but a cruel painting." What did I forget? The zombie felt guilty from being stared at. Your physical body, the original you, was once as close as a brother to that person. Jiao Daoi's expression was complicated. These words resounded at this moment, and they were simply even more terrifying than chaotic immortal lightning. It caused the ears of all the evolvers to drone, and they didn't dare believe their ears. The person who was as close as a brother? The background of the previous incarnation of the zombie was too terrifying. It was simply too shocking. The zombie had vaguely heard about these things and knew some of the old stories from other people's mouth. Did this mean that he had already forgotten about them? Great eras change. In the future, you and that dog went to search for some great medicine. You saw that person across the river of time and cried out to warn him, but you yourself almost suffered a disaster. Nine Daoi spoke again. When some old stories were spoken, it was truly shocking. It made the true immortals' scalps go numb and their hair stand on end. In the distance, old Gu's red lips and white teeth made him grimace. He really wanted to say, "Motherf asterisk Kerr, is this true? You scared this old man to death." Long Diu, who was also the toad Ouyang Feng, was so scared that his face turned deathly white. He shut his mouth and didn't spit out any more saliva. Jiao Daoi said in a low voice, "It's very simple. Let me ask you, do you still remember that silver-haired girl? She is someone you shouldn't forget even if you die." Who? The zombie was at a loss. He didn't remember such a person. Who hasn't been young? Jiao Daoi spoke about some past events in an extremely concise manner. That person was also young, and the zombie and a young lady from the lunar jade rabbit race were both that person's good friends when they were young. They had many things worth remembering. This left the dog emperor stupefied. The zombie had liked a woman from the lunar jade rabbit race? After hearing Jiao Daoi's simple narration, the zombie trembled. He indeed couldn't remember those things or that woman. However, he didn't know why, but there was a type of emotion in the depths of his body that made him want to cry. What kind of person was he? He was an old monster who had lived for who knew how many years, so how could he still have this type of emotion? A woman could make him lose control? Impossible. This type of feeling, this type of ignorant time, could only be possessed by those youngsters. How could he have such a laughable impulse? However, he didn't know why, but the depths of his heart felt like it was dripping with blood. He always felt like he had forgotten something. Jiao Daoi looked at him and said, "When you were young, you were a close friend who went through life and death together. When heaven and earth were in chaos, you were separated forever. After endless time, You revived from the burial earth and tried your best to remember everything. However, now you have forgotten. If you aren't someone who died, then who is? In order not to forget, the zombie had once engraved all the memories related to that woman into his soul light and branded them into his flesh true body. However, now everything was empty. The zombie was silent and didn't move at all. However, in the depths of his body, in the unknown corner of his heart, there seemed to be a crack torn open. He vaguely saw a blurry scene. He revived from the burial earth and crazily dug up the old land, digging into the underworld. He cried loudly, wanting to find that woman. However, there was nothing else. It was a complete blank. He really couldn't remember. This shouldn't be my memory. Who am I? How old am I now? How could I have this type of emotional impulse? The zombie shook his head with all his might. However, there really was some kind of indescribable pain in his heart. It was as if endless sorrow was surging up. After some of the zombie's past was revealed, the dog emperor originally wanted to laugh and ridicule him. However, after seeing his expression, he shut his mouth and didn't say anything. Who hadn't been young before? That woman and the zombie had once walked together with that person. They were close friends, but in the end they were exceptionally miserable. If the zombie really had that kind of emotion, had that kind of past, and had once crazily searched for the whereabouts of that woman, even digging up her remains, no one could laugh at him. The dog emperor also became silent. That woman and the zombie had walked through a great era with that person. They had witnessed unimaginable brilliance, as well as the blood and chaos that followed. Then, they fell into decline, and only endless sorrow remained. I'll go and try. The zombie couldn't remember the woman from before. He actually rushed out resolutely and wanted to personally enter the depths of the reincarnation path to feel it. He wanted to determine the truth. Was he really dead? Don't. The dog emperor pulled him back. He didn't have the heart to do this. He was afraid that this old friend would finally stir up some kind of emotion and reveal the sorrow in the depths of his heart. He was resolute as he blocked the zombie, not letting him go. The zombie was also very resolute. It's fine. Right now, I'm neither human nor ghost. I don't even know how much longer I can hold on. What is there that I can't accept? What is there that I can't let go of? Let my true body go take a look. The dog emperor said in a low voice, since you insist on going, then we will witness everything. I believe that with the emperor corpse on my back, the truth will be revealed. No one can fool a celestial emperor, even if he has become a corpse. He actually wanted to make a big fuss. This was because he suspected that there might be some power in the depths of reincarnation that had deceived the people of the world. He wanted the zombie to bring the emperor corpse to verify the truth. Behind the dog emperor, the broken bell was accompanied by the emperor corpse, stained with blood. This was one of the 3 celestial emperors. The dog emperor had once carried him through the heavens, wanting to find the great medicine to revive him. Not long ago, he had even carried the emperor corpse to the Soul River to fight. The zombie crossed time and space, following a blurry path that surpassed the imagination of the people of the world. He directly fell into the depths of the reincarnation path. As expected, he came with the emperor corpse on his back. He and the black dog's bodies had long been contaminated with the aura of this celestial emperor. Otherwise, how could anyone else carry it? They were destined to explode. He went straight into reincarnation, wanting to use the celestial emperor as a test to verify everything here. The outcome of the 2 possibilities would be revealed. 1. The heavens were destroyed, and the evolvers of all races were dead. Time and space were but a scroll, and everyone was created by splashing ink. It could also be said that they were created by that person's visualization. The second possibility was that that person had never existed. It was a void, and there had never been such a person. The zombie was very decisive. He carried the emperor corpse on his back and directly charged into the shimmering golden energy. In an instant, some kind of emotion emerged in the depths of his body. He once again vaguely saw himself desperately digging up the old ground, digging through the ancient history, searching for something. Was there really such a woman? However, he had forgotten. That era, where are those people? The zombie shouted. For some reason, there was an inexplicable sadness in his heart again, and he couldn't help but want to roar. He didn't know whether it was because of his roar or because of the Celestial Emperor's test, but it actually triggered a shocking change here. The entire world seemed to be rotating. Rumbling sounds rang out incessantly as golden light flowed out from the depths of the reincarnation path. Many people outside couldn't help but cry out in alarm. How is this possible? At this moment, many people cried out in alarm. Wherever the light passed, the world seemed to be rotating. Heaven and earth hung upside down once again as an unpredictable change occurred. It was about to be overturned. The faces of Chu Feng, Yao Yao, and Zhou Shi, who were thought to be alive, were now dotted with bloodstains. Meanwhile, the bloodstains on the faces of those who were thought to be long dead were actually dissipating. The world is reincarnating? Reincarnation? The 9 Taoists trembled. At the same time, on a special region of the reincarnation path, a clay idol that had been sitting quietly since ancient times began to tremble. If Chu Feng saw this, he would certainly be shocked. That was the clay idol that needed reincarnation talismans to be worshipped. Chapter 1558. Hell is empty, evil spirits are in the human world, and the dead will eventually return. The heavens are all in the process of reincarnation. Jiudao Yi murmured. His words were somewhat frightening. At this moment, golden waves of light spread from the depths of the reincarnation path and covered the entire two-realm battlefield. Many people were covered. The people who were previously thought to be alive were the malicious spirits that walked the human world. Some evolvers immediately felt a bone-piercing chill. They felt a chill from head to toe as they looked at the people beside them. Their faces were covered in blood, and they immediately felt a chill from the bottom of their hearts. People kept retreating as if they had fallen into an ice cellar. The universe was overturned, and heaven and earth were overturned. What kind of world was this? There were no real people, and the living were all malicious spirits. What was even more terrifying was that this strange order of heaven and earth was maintained in a state of normalcy, and no one was aware of it. What's wrong with this world? Malicious spirits walk the human world, but the real people are all dead. Some people said with a trembling voice. There was a great fear that came from the depths of their souls. In a certain special area of the reincarnation path, the mud placenta sat with a thick layer of dust rising from his body. His body seemed to be reviving, especially his eyes. His eyelids seemed to be rustling as if they were about to open. However, due to some kind of great Tao rule or the strange runes, this kind of awakening seemed to be extremely slow and could stop at any time. Patterns constantly flickered on the mud placenta's body before rapidly vanishing. Sand filled the sky from its body, which had been extinguished for ages, and fell into the abyss on the broken reincarnation path, leaving behind ripples. Then, boundless golden light waves were shaken out. In front of the two-realm battlefield, the rotten corpse growled once more in the reincarnation path. I've forgotten everything? That person used to be my brother. But where are you? The whole world is boundless, and the people of that era are almost all dead. Who is left? The strange dragon, Ouyang Feng, saw the blood on Chu Feng's face and immediately felt a chill down his spine. He retreated and cried out involuntarily, "You're a dead person?" He looked at old Gu, whose face was also covered in blood as if he was lifeless. He said with a trembling voice, "Hell is empty, and the malicious spirits are in the human world. Are the people who were previously thought to be alive all malicious spirits?" Then, Long Yu looked at Zhou Shi and quickly retreated. He felt that he was surrounded by evil spirits and couldn't see any living beings. The strange dragon's scalp went numb. Those who seemed to be dead were the real living beings, and those who were alive were malicious spirits. This was simply subversive. Chu Feng turned around and smiled at him, revealing a mouthful of snow-white teeth. The strange dragon staggered and was so scared that its soul almost floated away. The strange dragon shuddered and said, "The old ghost of the past is back. How powerful are you? But I don't have any enmity with you, so don't bare your teeth at me. No matter what, the two of us used to travel the world together, and we used to be brothers." Chu Feng didn't say anything, but old Gu directly slapped the back of the strange dragon's head and said, "You don't know your place. Look at yourself, you're drenched in blood as well, yet you dare to look down on others?" A bronze mirror was reflected in front of him. Long Diu almost jumped up, and then he stared blankly. His current appearance was truly a bit miserable. His face was pale and mottled with blood. He looked like a living corpse in the human world. At this time, Nine Daoi's voice finally sounded again, as if he had understood something, but also as if he was sleep-talking. With a trembling voice he said, "The entire world, the heavens, the universe, everything is in the process of reincarnation? Void is not void and death is not death. Everything in the human world, ancient and modern, the beginning is not fixed, and the end is not complete. Are they all not fixed? The world is like the two sides of yin and yang, changing. When the entire world rotates, whichever side the light shines on, that side has a chance of reviving and returning. With that person's methods, it isn't too difficult to condense a person's form if he wants to reappear. However, it might only be the reappearance of the memories in the cycle, and not the person from back then." Nine Dao kept on whispering as if he was recalling many things of the past. That person once said that the dead were dead. Even if he condensed the deceased person, it might only be the reconstruction of the physical body, and the reappearance of the memories. In fact, it was like a clone, and it might not be the person from back then. That person, even if he ruled over the ages and was invincible in the world, had also sighed in disappointment. When Nine Dao thought of these things, he thought of many things. That person wanted the people by his side to truly reappear. However, the so-called cycle of reincarnation, did it really revive the people of the past? Not necessarily. With that person's matchless and unmatched strength, what didn't he understand, and what didn't he know? He could even personally open the path of reincarnation and leave behind the ancestral sacrificial talisman, so how could he not condense the heroic spirit from back then? He felt that those who were condensed and reincarnated only had the exact same memories and physical body. They were just replicated bodies, while those people were forever dead, broken off from the past. Nine Daoi's voice was extremely low, and he said many things to himself. This left many people at a loss, shocked and horrified. They felt a type of helplessness and alarm. Reincarnation? Some people realized something. Was this that person's comprehension? Nine Dao had heard it before. Some people really did understand that the dead were dead. If they wanted to be resurrected, if they wanted to reincarnate, to reappear from the cycle of reincarnation, to look like the person from back then, to be the heroic spirit from back then, it was too difficult. Their intrinsic nature might have long changed. All of this was even believed to be a mere duplication. Although some people didn't understand and some were afraid, Chu Feng understood. He had never felt so cold before, and the coldness directly invaded his bones. Reincarnation was denied? Did this mean that those so-called reincarnated people weren't the people of the past? Then, what about his parents, Yellow Cattle, the Big Black Yak, and the others? Dong Dahu and Ouyang Feng had reappeared, and they had already successfully reincarnated into the world of the living. Were they also denied? They weren't the people of the past? Chu Feng's body went cold, and the world in his heart trembled as if it was about to collapse. If some things were true, then it was too heavy and difficult for people to accept. Long Diu, who was also the toad Ouyang Feng from back then, was completely dumbfounded. He was like a clay sculpture, and even the meaning of his existence was denied? I'm no longer me? The strange dragon muttered. They weren't the only ones at the scene. A few leaders from various races had come, and there were even ultimate creatures and fallen true immortals. Some of these creatures at the peak of the evolutionary pyramid had terrifying backgrounds and complicated root. Some of them had stepped onto the reincarnation path with talismans in hand and reincarnated with their memories. At this moment, their hearts tightened. Their own reincarnation was considered to be a big problem? They weren't their past selves anymore? This doesn't make sense. An old monster's voice was trembling. He was already a rotting great universe-level creature, and it was extremely difficult for him to reach this step. He had once lived a second life, but now, he was hearing such words. It was difficult for him to accept that his body wasn't his own. For a moment, the true ultimate creatures were all silent and pondering. Reincarnation was fake, and the true body didn't exist. Did everything become void? That person didn't come to a final conclusion, did he? The short elder who had recovered from the famed mountains and left behind the scripture of time spoke. He also couldn't take it any longer. Apparently, the experts who studied time were even more afraid of this problem. At this time, even the black shadow in the darkness, the creature suspected to be a fallen immortal who had reached the end of the extreme, spoke. His voice was hoarse and deep, but it possessed shocking penetrative power. It was as if it could tear the void apart and pierce through the souls of many evolvers. Even that person hasn't come to a conclusion as to whether the reincarnated are the same person from back then. He's only hesitating, but he hasn't completely rejected it, right? Jiudao shook his head after hearing this. He stood on the reincarnation path and said, "That person has been hesitating and lost for eons. Perhaps that person has come to a conclusion." He didn't want to admit this fact, but now that he thought of everything from back then, he had no choice but to speak the truth with a heavy heart. What's going on with this world? Even the martial madman, who was imprisoned by the short elder, couldn't help but speak. He was extremely conflicted and wanted to find out the truth. Jiudao said, "If you want the people from back then to come back to life, and not the duplicates condensed in the reincarnation cycle, that person might have done it. We can all see it now." He continued, "The entire world is reincarnating, and all the time has the same conditions. Everything has been traced back to the past, and specific historical moments have reappeared. When those people are resurrected, every blade of grass between heaven and earth, and every speck of dust floating in the air, everything is the same as when they were separated from each other. Everything has been reproduced, and the people who have come back to life may be the people from back then." It was like a clap of thunder. His words caused the ears of all the evolvers to ring, and they were extremely shocked. "Perhaps it's far more complicated than what I've said. All the factors are minute to the extreme, and the true conditions for resurrection are far beyond what you and I can imagine. Look, the world is rotating, and there are some areas that you and I can't normally see, but now they have reappeared. There are some people with bloodstains on their faces, and there are some mysterious mountains and rivers that you and I can't usually see, but now we can see it with our own eyes. This is the reappearance of ancient history. As time intertwines, it occasionally fuses with the present. It may seem chaotic, but I feel that this is the true revival and return." Jiudao was talking like a madman. Some people didn't understand, but some understood a little. The world is reincarnating, and the entire history is reappearing. After all the unimaginable conditions are met, the past will reappear, and some heroic spirits will return. The integration of ancient history and the present? It was deafening, and some people felt that the world had been turned upside down. They were shocked and shuddered. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.